Okay, thank you very much.
All right.
I mean,
Bismillah,
I've
walhamdulillah. So,
thank you
brother,
very much.
do you want to introduce yourself to
Oh, hi there.
me?
My name's Khurram, and my background's in clinical sciences and physics. And I'm a student, a bona fide student of clinical sciences and physics. I'm currently reading astronomy, but previously read radiation biology. And prior to that, I was doing normal physics. And before that, I worked, in surgeries, pharmacies, and clinical laboratories of the NHS. So my background is clinical science and physics to cut short, but I also have a few qualifications in maths, further maths, and quantitative statistics and basic epidemiology quantitation. So the reason I've met you and I wanted to present my case make use of your precious time, knowing how busy you are, is that I've heard lots and lots of talks of Azra and yourself, and I've found out, and it's not an accusation, that you two legends know very little about the architectural heuristics of the world we live in. And I wanted to look. The reason I'm coming to you is because I've felt that there's no actual bona fide student with concretized knowledge of physics and clinical sciences in your group, in your cohort. And I've seen about 2 to 3 times that there were people who attempted to talk about the structural micromechanics of the place we live in and how things are and not as they appear to be. And I've been researching it for the past, I don't know, but maybe the better part of half a decade. And I wanted to I don't look. This is not going to be a typical class. Sorry, hello?
Yeah, go ahead. I'm listening.
Hang on. So this is not going to be a documentary on, why Earth is flat and why this and that. No, you can do all of it yourself. You could do it, or you could do it yourself. You could spend 200 hours, and you can fish out the data yourself, and there's plenty of people doing it. But now it's being removed and banned and flagged off of YouTube because they're extremely vulnerable. My case that I sent you in print is to evaluate the deception in science and how maths and physics can be deceptive, and how the heliocentric Masons have been working on presenting hyper complex information to simple masses to a level of complexity that they would just give up and accept it. And recently, professional videographers, have been doing acutely important research on space station, on the false ESA transmission, NASA transmission, and all of that. That's now, you'll have to work very hard to find it out. You have to, I can recommend you some channels in private on over WhatsApp, which you can go and look for yourself. But on top of that, I'm going to make my case again. I'm going to identify how information has been perverted to confuse people, how things are being made to appear whilst they aren't as they appear to be, which is extremely didactic. You are made to believe that you're a blue, pale blue dot and a chemical monkey, and I'm going to disprove it by let me please get my script in front of me, and then I'll start speaking because I don't want to babble around. So bear with me, please, just for a moment.
Yeah, if you need to use the screen to put your presentation on in front of everyone, I think there is a way for me.
Yes, please. Thank you very much. Bear with me, please. I'm going to use WhatsApp now, and the script. All right, thank you. So I've got the script here. I think I'm a bit too anxious for it to be. If you could put it on the screen, that'd be great. I'll be very, very grateful because I'm a bit too anxious or excited.
What do you want me to do? I don't understand.
If you could please, put the script from your side on the screen.
Well, you sent it to me on WhatsApp, so
yes,
I
please.
would have to. So
it's about the flat Earth and actual structural hierarchy, and it's a synoptic analysis. So yeah, So I mean, I know it'll be quite challenging to people who haven't studied further maths or graduate physics, and I'll try to simplify it as much as possible. And I'd like to get in touch with Azrar as well to talk about it because he is confusing the egg-shaped model with the onion model, and he's not able to visualize the spatio-temporal structural heuristics of how things are. And lots of people get confused between egg shape and the flat disk in the middle, and they don't know how to integrate it spatially in their imagination because they've been corrupted by the globe model from the very beginning. So my case that I'm making today, it's that it's been quite challenging to bring all the salient features of flat Earth factual information in one leaflet and to present it as a singular, cogent, and coherent document in a readable and accessible format. The aim of this document is to cover the left out aspects in a synoptic fashion and to provide a holistic but comprehensive overview of the situational complications facing this research, and also to elucidate the micromechanics of heavenly architecture and how NASA, RASA, JAXA, which is Japanese, are clouding the facts and mingling it perniciously with fiction. The objective of this document
Is
is
this it? What we have before us?
yes, please. Uh, it has been quite challenging. Yeah. So the objective of this document is to elucidate the Earth is a flat disk encased in a dome above and below, giving the whole structure an egg shape as described in the Quran. And my duty is to integrate the facts and provide an insight that would benefit the educators and audiences in Islamic religious circle and understanding the deception of NASA, which is Dajjalic to the core. It's serpentine and controlled by Masonic heliocentric Masons that worship the sun, and they've justified the whole. They've gotten rid of geocentricity and revolving everything around. Now, I also did complex revolutionary calculations of how and why the sky on top of the Earth should not stay the same. I also wanted to talk about Tariq, the circumpolar, the circumpolar star, and so I've quite a few proofs. It'll be not be a typical documentary about why the Earth is flat, but rather the things that have not been covered by flat earthers, because most of them don't have, a background in physics. And so, if you don't have a background in physics, you find it very difficult to understand the deception that's being put on you. So,
Well,
I'd like to.
why don't we start by answering one question in line. First is if the, well, actually, let's do two to start with. If the Earth is a dome on top and the dome on the bottom and a disk in the middle, that does not make it an egg shape. The second question I have is that in a disk-shaped scenario, how do you not see the sun and the moon at the same time?
So the first question, it does make it an egg shape because the dome is not perfectly circular hemispherical. It's not a circle cut in half. It's it's um, it's actually a concave sort of a lid goes all the way till, and then that's where the South Pole deception comes in. South Pole is the ice wall around. There's no such thing as South Pole. The magnetic compass, a lodestone, only points to the Qutbul Madar, which is the center of the universe, which is North Pole, and which is the center from where the green light originates, and that's the center. So that's a concave lid on top and concave at the bottom, where the Hades and all the realms are. And on so that's, let me please clarify the first question is that if the Earth, I'm glad you asked it, if the Earth didn't have a dome on top, a solid crystalline dome, HARP wouldn't work. A high auroral frequency radio program, which is the chief weather manipulation manufacture program that manufactures earthquakes, tsunamis, heat waves, freeze waves, and whatnot. And Bill Gates has invested heavily into it. Now, in terms of physics, let me tell you this. If the Earth was a globe with gas on top and gas at the bottom, a gas ball with a rock floating around the sun floating around the center of the universe, the center of the Milky Way galaxy, and the galaxy rotating at the center of the bubble of the universe, which is 40. The bubble of the universe is now 42 billion light years. When I was in GCSE, it was 40 billions. Then when I went to A levels, it was 41 billion years old. So they can't even confirm or ratify how what the actual radial dimensions of the bubble of the universe is. So look, what HARP does is it fires frequency at a particular point so that it would reflect at the country they want to fire at. Now, gases, let me tell you, sir, gases do not reflect. If you have a gas in a vacuum chamber or gas in a room, you fire a beam of microwaves, laser, light, it would not reflect it. Gases as a phase condition can only absorb, get excited, get de-excited, or transmit, which is the transmission comes under the Beer-Lambert's law. Then there's another scientist who determined the universe unidimensionality of time. So so gases cannot transmit. Sorry, they cannot reflect anything. And so they fire it at the dome, and then
Is,
it goes
is
back to the. Now
reflection
that's
and
the first question.
transmission not basically the same thing?
Sorry.
Is transmission and reflection basically not the
No,
same
no,
thing?
no, no. Transmission is letting it through.
Right.
Reflection is blocking it and sending it back at an angle which is consistent to the Snell's law. Snell's law is for plane mirror is different, but for a concave mirror, for a convex mirror is completely different. You can't get the same angle. So obviously they've done their calculations at convex surface. They've obviously charted the curvature of the dome, because if it were pure gas, it would just pass through. It would never come down.
Curvature is assumed there, whether it's a dome or whether it's the Earth
Yeah,
as.
there is curvature, yes. But if it were a gas, they'd fire the higher auroral frequency and they would just pass through. It wouldn't get reflected. And it wouldn't come down. It would just go through, and that is it. But for you to reflect the beams and to come down and cause an earthquake or a heat wave or a freeze wave or tsunami, it has to hit something that is solid. And if you look at Operation Fishbowl, which was in 1950s, they fired megaton nuclear warheads into the sky without they weren't testing anything. They were just firing megaton nuclear in order to break the dome, in order to break through, so that they can go through and then find more power, more occult spiritual power. Because vast majority Operation Paperclip and Operation Fishbowl are intermittently linked. And once they captured all the Nazi science and technology, and all the scientists were cleverly extradited, and they were released from the Nuremberg trial, and they were given, pardon, international pardon, and they were incorporated into the MIT, Yale, Harvard, all the Ivy League institutions. Then these people, once they then coached the next generation, that is now Silicon Valley. Silicon Valley was graduates going out and starting their own firms, and a massive entrepreneurial boom that led to dot-com bubble boom. And then what you need to realize is that your first question is about the dome. And the second thing is that gases can't, and the other thing about.
You have a picture of this dome?
Plenty out there, plenty people, once they begin to research, you'll find so many curvature. So dome has a curvature, they've calculated it. Snell's law for plane mirror is different to lenses. Now in optics, which is graduate optics, you have mirrors and lenses. Now lenses are clear, they let the light through, they're transparent, they let it through. But not all lenses are transparent to all EM radiation, electromagnetic. Some are opaque to infrared, some are opaque to ultraviolet, some are opaque to, visible light, some are opaque to X-rays, depending on, what kind of material you're using for lens manufacture. You can get copper lenses as well in refraction experiments. You can get glass lens, silica lens, cobalt lens, different kinds of lens, sodium lenses that are very brittle and very delicate for temporary, basic physics experiments to elucidate certain concepts. And so Snell's law is different for lenses and mirrors. Telescopes have mirrors and lenses in them. The refraction telescopes, reflected telescopes, and then they are further digitized, that can take the electronic information and electronically digitize the information. Then on top of that, you have, so for plane mirror, now we know that it's not a plane mirror on top. So for plane, something that's plane, it would be the angle of incidence would be equal to angle of reflection. but it's obviously it's not the case. And you might say if it's crystalline, if it's a lens on top, it must be letting that through, the light of HARP, as the radiation of HARP through as well. No, because it's very dark and murky on top, and they've got waters of firmament on top. It acts as a mirror, and it's so that's the solid. We've confirmed after multiple scientific investigations that the dome on top is completely opaque, is acting as an opaque mirror, a concave mirror. And if you look at the experiment that was done by the ether denial experiment that was done by a very famous, powerful scientist, his name I forgot. His name was very. Um, he was one of the. He did the experiment in 1900s. Euler, or no, not Euler. Sorry. He did an experiment to prove the Earth is stationary. That failed as well. It failed so horribly that Einstein, sorry, Michelson Morley, he did an experiment to prove that there was no such thing as ether, and the Earth is rotating around its axis and around apogee and perigee around the sun, and the sun is revolving around the center of the Milky Way, and the Milky Way is revolving around the center of the galaxy, which is 42 billion light years now. And it failed horribly, so badly that then Einstein had to cover it up. And Einstein, when he published his papers Annus Mirabilis in 1905, he introduced relativity as a theoretical and a religious concept as well, which was then taken forward by Illuminati and Freemason speakers, motivational speakers like Alan Watts and Krishnamurti. And they began their own religion of humanitarianism, worshipping yourself, you are God, and everything, basically ruining the impression of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and then ruining the religious concept, breaking it and making you a secular atheist, sort of a self-worshipping entity, and just focusing more on Kundalini and incorporating foreign entities in your body to increase your performance. And that's where Alan Watts and Krishnamurti, these people are linked to. They're linked to the cult of Einstein, who was hyper-celebritized like Stephen Hawking. Now, I've read a few books of Stephen, and I've wasted my money and time. That guy, he's talking about pure theoretical fiction. And he basically was a very selfish, narcissist, wild sort of a person. And he contributed nothing apart from theoretical jargon to physics. All his books are like glorified physics novels, and you're wasting your time and money by reading his books and novels. And he continues to talk about black holes and all the concepts that aren't, most of them aren't even real, and they're purely theoretical and mathematical. Now, after having done that, if you are part of the physics community, you'll know that Stephen Hawking, the paraplegic wheelchair guy talking with his eyes on a computer, he had a very famous dispute with Leonard Susskind of Yale. And he basically, the dispute was about the black holes having a white hole at the end or not, because the argument was that black holes, when they suck it, they produce a jet at the end, and this and that. Now, whatever the argument, the dispute was, it exposed Stephen Hawking so badly as a hyper-celebritized, narcissistic vermin that there was a divide, and more people went to Leonard Susskind because he's a better, bigger teacher of physics. He knows how to handle philosophy. He doesn't let philosophy dominate physics, the quantitative physics, and he knows how to take everything in a bit of proportion.
So can you please answer for me? How come we don't see the sun and the moon at the same time if there's a disk with a dome on top?
Okay, so the reason you don't see sun and a moon at the same time is because the rotational pattern of these two entities, one symbolic for gold and the other one symbolic for silver, they are revolving anti-clockwise, but there is a lag, a rotational omega, which is rads per second lag, angular lag. So the rate at which they map the disk is.
So are you saying that the whole world, that it's not dark on one side and
It is dark on one side and it is dark, luminary on the other, because the sun is covering the one half and the moon is covering on the other half when it
Yeah,
is covering the
but
half.
if they're
But
both
when the moon is,
together on a flat above a flat surface
yes,
or
above a
by a
flat surface.
flat surface, then we would see both, right? And
No,
there
because
would
the
be no
sun
dark
isn't
night. There
like a
would be
giant mega nuclear fusion power plant as it's portrayed to be. It's not millions and millions of miles away as it's portrayed to be. If you use Pythagorean
okay. That's
geometry,
wait. But if there's a flat surface, if
yeah,
there is, if this is a flat surface, right? If the sun is here, the moon is here, how is half the world going to be dark and the other have light?
that's a very simple, basic question. I mean, you might
Start with
remember,
this dome
you
over
might,
here,
yeah, yeah.
sun here, there's a moon here. How does one half get dark, the other half get light?
Yeah, so you must have seen the moon during the day on many days. You might have seen it in the past, haven't you? Um, have you? Do you remember seeing the moon during the daytime in your life? Sometimes when it
Yeah,
appeared as a hollow crescent or a hollow disk.
sure. Yeah.
Yeah. So what I'm trying to say is there is a lag, and we verified the model multiple times. The angle at which, sorry, the rate of mapping of angles of the sun and the rate of mapping of angle of the moon in a circular fashion on top of the flat disk is slightly lagged, and that lag keeps them a bit away. And they have their own cycles, but their cycles are also mingling at times of eclipses. But there's also the presence of a black sun, which is known to be very, very ethereal and mystical. Now, why is half of the Earth um, not lit or illuminated, and why the rest of it is? Um, that's quite intuitive. That's apparent. You've answered your question by asking the question. So why is how is half the world lit and half not? It's because you're still imagining it as the size of the sun is 9 million times bigger than the earth, which is not. This is the deception I'm trying to talk about, the brainwashing that people still, even while I was talking about the actual architectural heuristics, are still imagining the NASA model. That's how brainwashed everyone is. So you have to imagine the actual size of the solar body rather than imagining it to be a 9 million times bigger solar fusion powerhouse giant. If that were the case, then the whole Earth would be cooked and roasted. But because the Earth is very, very vast, and the sun is appreciably large, but it can only cover so much at a certain amount of time when it's mapping angle from east to west. And someone in your video call talked about, that there are two easts and two wests. That doesn't prove globe Earth either. That further instills the idea of a flat disk, because when you're standing in the center, which is the North Pole, Qutbul Madar, you can see that two sides will be on your right, and two sides will be on your diagonally speaking. If you take a disk and you're standing in the dead center of its circumferential center, which is equiradial from all sides, you'll be standing in the middle, and you'll see that if you proper figure in the middle on a circle, you see that you'll have two areas on your right and two areas on your um, left, and mashriqain wal maghribain. So you have two easts and two wests.
Okay. So,
Now,
how do you explain seasons
well, season, you might remember
and the
Tropic of
change in
Cancer.
temperature? How do you explain change
Yeah, yeah,
in
that's a
seasons?
good question, because I was going to come to it. The Tropic of Cancer, the Tropic of Capricorn, and equator, like the equatorial orbit. People think I'm going to deny satellites as well, but no, I'm not going to, because satellites are suspended, in the air, and they can function fine. But now, when it comes to seasons, let's bring an example of test cricket. You might remember that South Africa, Australia are quite close to each other. Yes.
Okay.
Um, and the Boxing Day Test match, when the cricket Test match is being played in Australia in the 26th of December every year, it's part of the Australian summers, and the winters the winters in Australia are in opposite time, which is June and July and May, whereas this in South Africa as well. Whereas the summers are in December and in the end of the Gregorian calendar. Now, what I'm trying to say is, now if you take a square piece of A4 sheet in front of you, A4 leaf, plain paper, you draw a circle, and in that circle you draw 1, 2, and 3 lines. Then you'll see that this is what I'm trying to get at, that the sun moves laterally, like it moves. So it moves across the circles. For example, the diagram is available from the search engine, Google. That you can, if you take a sheet of paper and you draw 3 circles in there, and label one equator, the other one tropic of Cancer, tropic of Capricorn, then and you put, you'll see that in summer the sun shifts its orbit closer to closer at equator, and as winter comes, it goes away from equator and translates back, translational motion, translates back to away from equator, equidistant, equiradially, back to tropic of Cancer or Capricorn. I think it's Capricorn. Capricorn's at the end and Cancer's in the middle, and then you've got equator. If I'm correct, correct me if I don't remember
So
correctly.
do you think the sun and the moon are also a disk?
Yeah, these planets. I've used 2 telescopes in my life. And I've never been able to locate the CGI, the fake CGI, images purported by NASA that, oh, this is a green planet, this is a blue planet, this is a sphere, this is this, this is that. They appear to be as lights flickering in water. And I've worked very hard on the concept of sonoluminescence. In Bible, they talk about stars being angels that are singing at their spaces and at the anointed place. And I've read and discussed practicals, experimental physics practicals, where they took a glass of water and they fired high frequency waves at one particular point, and that particular point began to glow, and it acted like a star, just like stars do. These stars they are lamps, just as Quran says, these are lamps in the sky. They aren't hyper, aggressive, luminary thermal bodies with fusion and fission going in there. The magnetars, blazars, quasars, pulsars. They aren't X-ray beaming giants like exploding and then correcting, and nebulae and this and that. These are structures in water, and they're undergoing changes. And so, for example, they say stars are, they have star cycle, they have fusion, this and that, and they continue to show CGI images, but they've never actually shown an actual process of star formation and star disintegration by actual procedure. And the concept of NASA is that these are thermal bodies existing in vacuum. And they are blasting and gasping and breathing fire. And but whereas if you look at the biblical model and the architectural heuristics model, you'll see that these are lights flickering. And if you focus, there were lots and lots of videos of people doing experiments, private
I don't know,
scientists.
the moon looks quite circular to me.
I mean, spherical or circular?
Circular even, because it's
Yes.
3D.
Disk, is it? Because they keep talking about the backside of the moon, but they've never been able to discover the backside. Look, if the Earth and the moon were rotating around the axis, someone on the Earth would definitely be able to map out and see the dark side of the moon. In terms of rotational mechanics, Keplerian dynamics, like rotating around the axis and then rotating around the apogee and perigee of the sun, you cannot miss the dark side of the sun. That was extremely non-intuitive from a mathematical calculational point of view. Now, if I go back to the history of the script, let me tell you what happened in the 1500s when the people used to believe in the correct model, the geocentric model. There was a scientist, chief scientist called Tycho Brahe in the Danish court, the Royal Danish court in 1500s. He used to be the chief astronomer of Europe, and he controlled all the data, the stellar astronomical data that was called Rudolphine tables. These Rudolphine tables were then hijacked by Kepler, And Kepler, what he did was he poisoned Tycho Brahe. Now, his status of death remained as poisoned for a long time in history, but only recently, they changed it to, oh, it was suspected as poisoning, but he actually died a normal death. Because if they confirmed the poisoning status, that would make Kepler look dirty, very dirty. And then what Kepler did was he changed and altered all the Rudolphine tables, published it in his name. Then, he worked with Galileo Galilei, Copernicus, all of these heliocentric people, the Masons. They then worked very hard to prove that the Earth was a spherical, rotating planetary body model, rotating around the sun, rotating around the center of the Milky Way, around the center of the universe. And they've inflated numbers so big. Like I did a full calculation that if the radius of the universe is 42 billion light years, you convert it to kilometers, you simplify it to meters, you calculate the volume of the sphere of the universe, and then you calculate the rotational speed of the sun around, sorry, or you can calculate the rotational speed of the Milky Way galaxy around the center of the universe, and you'll see how long it would take for it to cover. It would take like X times 10 to the power 10 years for it to, or seconds, or I think, yeah, for it to make one circle. So they've inflated the numbers so large to make you feel minuscule, worthless, useless, a chemical monkey. And if I'm going to, so robbery of Rudolphine tables by Kepler and subsequent modification is a huge tragedy and will never be recovered, because this is the now moving on to the gas phase behavior. Gases, I'm going to reconfirm that gases cannot reflect. They can absorb, they can excite, de-excite, and transmit. And for HARP to exist, there has to be a dome from which reflection of high energy
The
radiation would
problem
occur.
is that when you bring HARP into evidence, the problem is we don't really know much about HARP, right? And how they do things and how they don't do things. So I don't know if
Well, you
uh,
need to study papers on weaponized weather modification, of which Bill Gates is a very prominent shareholder, and
how do you
Russia.
explain seeing different stars at different areas of the Earth or longitudes?
Yeah, that's fine. That's perfect. But you have to realize that the stars, the
If the Earth
stellarium,
is flat, then shouldn't the sky always be the same, or
it
no?
is the same. It's been the same forever. And but if
No, but if
you
you go to
take the
different
globe
parts
model, it
and
wouldn't
at
be the
different
same.
seasons, in different parts of the world and in different seasons, as seasons change, even the Quran mentions that they change, they move.
Yes, they change. They rotate over the stellarium, as we call it, the stellarium, the canopy of the stars, the stellarium. They rotate over the Earth, and but the constellations, there are 13 there's serpentine constellation that's been coming into, but they all stay the same, and they come back to where they started from. If you were a planetary globular planetary body model rotating in the space at the speed of 1,000 kilometers per second and rotating around the sun, you would never have the same sky on top of you ever, ever.
How
You,
come, like, if you're in the north side of the Earth, you'll see the Big Dipper and the Small Dipper, but if you go to the south, you don't
that's
see that?
because of inclination, declination, sidereal time, the perspective of where you are, the tilt of the earth, and how close you are to the sky, and which stars are visible there, which ones are passing through, what part of stellarium is in rotation over what part of that. Also, that is what that's what people have a very difficult time imagining spatially. And one of the things NASA capitalizes upon is that they juxtapose their spatial imagination on people, so that it would make it very hard for people to imagine the correct juxtaposition, the correct visual spatial imagination. And they present concepts as so complex that the normal simple people just give up, because they present it as though something that's unreachable and only we know it, and we're telling it to you. You couldn't you couldn't have found it out. Whereas the information out there is open to observation, and Almighty is not vulnerable. He doesn't need to hide anything from you and I. There's no need to hide anything. Whereas Jassa, Rasa, Nasa, first of all, you can't even become an astronaut. You have to be a Mason to become an astronaut, and the amount of acting and everything that goes into it. And there were documentaries that proved that the moon landing is completely fake. They killed the people who were trying
We
to,
live in Washington, D.C., which I lived in Maryland, and they have a NASA department there. I know many Muslims who used to come to my Jummah khutbah working at NASA.
yeah, but they
I
must
know
have
that
been
they have
normal admin people or computer people, and they would never be actual astronauts working on the set or going into the supposed ship. But they would never let them into that particular level. Or I mean, if you have an example, then please let me know, because all of the astronauts up until now have been Russian or American, and a certain kind of American, a certain kind of Russian.
The
And
brother who owns the website moonsighting.com, his name is Dr. Khalid Shokat. He works for NASA, or used to. He's retired now. I know the family personally, and he uses calculations to determine moon sighting or where the moon is most likely. You can go to moonsighting.com. And, I have spent the last 10 days of Ramadan with him, and in understanding the whole process of moon sighting from a calculation perspective. I even went to his house to further understand it. I spent 10 days in Ramadan with him. Then on and off, we had many conversations on the subject. He's also an advisor to the Islamic Fiqh Council of North America on these issues. Anyway, the point being that the explanation he gave me about not seeing the backside of the moon, for example, sounded very logical. Also, all I'm saying is that there are.
what was his explanation again?
That was about 20 years ago. We had that sitting, but if I remember correctly, it has to do with the fact, and everybody understands this, that the moon faces the Earth only on one side, but as the moon is rotating around the Earth, it does it does rotate, but it's also rotating around the Earth. So that's why it's the face of it is the same. Okay.
Sorry, can you repeat that, please? Because I didn't catch that. So if it's rotating around the Earth, it does change its phase. It's just sorry, it just does.
Which reminds me, honestly, I don't know is the best answer.
Okay, so I mean, I'm surprised you said that.
Let's say
it changes.
Let's say this is the Earth,
yeah.
Right? Or if there's something circular, let's say this is something circular.
Yeah.
So this is the moon, right? It's facing this side is facing this, right?
Yeah, no, he said that sometimes it does change the direction towards the Earth as well. But so how come it's not visible? So what I said in my argument was that
how in your model, how do we see the different moon phases?
The moon actually grows thin and grows back. It's not like it stays the same and you're only seeing a perspective of it out of refraction or reflection. Refraction is another deceptive, way they confuse people. Is that refraction? It can happen from air to glass, air to water, air to.
What about when the Quran says وَجَعَلَ قَمَرًا مُنِيرًا?
It grows back. Quran says it grows from a thin thing and grows back.
Quran also says it reflects light. وَجَعَلَ قَمَرًا مُنِيرًا, and we made the moon reflect light.
So where does reflection in Arabic come from? So what word is implying reflection?
Word is nur, and munira is the object that would throw the nur or give the nur.
Okay.
Whereas the sun, the Quran uses the word.
Could it be that it's luminous because they have experiments? That's fine. Perfect. I got your point. Thank you. So now, please let me tackle the first point, which is that your friend said that it does change. It does bring its face towards the Earth, the dark side towards the Earth, but then he didn't justify or complete the argument. What I'm saying is that because NASA, by its own word, says that the moon rotates around its axis and it rotates around the Earth, while the Earth is rotating at its axis around the axis, and it's then rotating around the sun. So at what, given this probabilistic distribution, the fact that it does rotate, if it didn't rotate, then I'd believe you. I'd believe that, but if it is rotating, then the excuse of not being able to see the backside of the moon is completely out of question. That you should be able to see the backside of the moon at some place on Earth. If
That is
it is
a logical thing, but the way it was explained to me, which I don't
Mhm.
know 100% right now, and maybe someday I can call him, but the way he explained it to me, it was very logical. And I
Okay, that's fine.
remember this distinctly, that it was very logical. It was only
That's
that
that.
it,
I
that
mean, I
it
think we need
that
to
it
have a
happened
deeper
20 years
discussion
ago.
there, so I can bring my pen and paper and do actual rotational calculations with that,
And that's what
person.
he's an expert at that because he does
That's
moon
fine. That's
sighting
perfect. That's
using the
the
telescope.
other thing I wanted you addressed is how come the moon grows back. You said that moon reflects, but if I told you that the light of the moon is cooler than the shade at night. So if you take the temperature of a shade and then you take the temperature on the moonlight is cooler than the shade. So would it be moon's own light or would it be the light being reflected?
I don't understand the question.
So if you took the temperature of of a shade at
Okay.
night, a shade under a tree or behind a wall
Are
or
you
a
saying the
shade,
moon's light is more cooler than
yes,
the
the
day?
temperature of the moonlight is cooler than the shade at a shaded area.
Yeah, that's an interesting phenomenon. Um, what about the fact that Hawaii, the state of Hawaii, has the seventh largest, highest peaks of the world, and Hawaii, as you know, is many islands, right? So you have islands that are 300 miles apart, 400 miles apart. How come when you go to the peak of one of the islands in Hawaii, you
Mhm.
don't see the other islands? If it was a flat Earth, wouldn't you be able to see the other islands?
Well, if you many people have done refraction experiments where they blew laser light from one end on one and they took it to thousands and thousand miles across and to a receptor, and it only deviated by 2%, and it was discussed as being invalid because the error. Normal machines in physics have an error percentage of more than 5%. In physics calculations, we keep a space of around about 5% uncertainty error, which is delta U over U times 100. We keep that 5% systematic error is unavoidable, whether it's a mass balance or it's any gravimetric calculations or any other electrical calculations. It will have a lot of systematic error because if you've got amplifiers, capacitors in a series and parallel circuit, all of them have their own systematic error, instrumental error, and then that instrumental error per device per circuit accumulates, and you get a slightly massive, slightly more accumulated, error. What I'm trying to say is that what you need to realize is that um, when we talk about it being flat and not spherical, it's not like a complete plain paper flat. Otherwise, you wouldn't have seas, you wouldn't have mountains. What we're talking about is that broadly speaking, it's a disk. And the experiments, the refraction experiments done in Eastern Europe, in Ukraine, and in America, they have had an accuracy of 2%, around about 2%. And this is how accurate the laser was. And also,
So,
let me tell
okay, if
you,
that is right, then how come all the prayers don't come in at the same time? Meaning, in other words, uh, it's different time where you are. It's a different time where I am. It's Maghrib is at a different time where I am. Maghrib
yeah,
is at
because of
a
the
different
different
time.
positions of the sun, and because it's half the world is in
But if it's a disk,
illumination, and
then shouldn't it be like the same?
We have to understand the spatial size metrics. So we have to assume the real size of the sun, the real size of the moon, and the actual ratio proportion of the Earth to the sun. We have to get rid of the NASA model and think in terms of Pythagoras. So if you do the Pythagorean geometrical calculations, you can see that the waves, the rays of the sun converge. The point at which they should converge is around about 3,000 miles. It's not 9 million miles. It converges at around about 3,000 miles, and the rays should meet because Euclidean geometry is very, very correct. And he was the first person to come up with 3D geometry. And it states that it has many, many theorems and formulae that can help you converge the rays to a singular point, and that comes out to be 3,000 miles. And sun is not as large as it's purported to be. The other thing I wanted to talk about with this, in connection with this, is that when they talk about, oh, it's a mirage that's formed, the reason Chicago line is city lines available at this place where it shouldn't be visible, it's supposed to be it's a mirage and it's refraction. Let me tell you, refraction can only take place between water to sea, water to oil, water to glass, between a denser and a rarer media, like a thinner media and a thick media. And for refraction to take place, you have to have a translucence, a condition of translucence, so that the light is passed through. And it can't happen from air to copper, air to this. But I mean, sound can get diffracted across opaque objects, but not light.
You have
Light is
induction heat, for example.
yeah,
So I
that's
don't.
yeah. So what I'm trying to say is refraction cannot take place from air to air. Now, mirage, when you see water in the desert, um, you have there's a dip, there are plants around, and there's a dip, and there's a sunlight glimmering on the sand. So the mirage in the desert happens between eyes and air and sand, when the sand is glimmering so hot that it gives you the illusion of golden sparkles of water. It's not happening between air to air. Now, the other thing I wanted to mention is I mentioned the paperclip and fishbowl and the Beer-Lambert's law principles
So
of
let's talk
refraction.
about if this is true, what you're saying, then this would not be a conspiracy, because I mean, conspiracy is only true so long as it's a few people that are part of an inner circle, right?
Yes, yes.
Uh, so this is what? This is not a
Wide-scale deception.
yeah, but what about people flying the planes? Like if I was to take a ticket,
Have they ever dipped?
if I
Yeah,
was
the
if I was to
plane.
ask you, okay,
Yeah.
look, if I was to say, come to me, we're gonna take a trip around the world, so to say, right? We're gonna start from one place, like let's say
Mhm.
Chicago, and we'll take a plane, and will we not come back to Chicago? What happens when we get to the edge?
Well, the edge is heavily guarded. You must have heard about the treaty and the North Pole Treaty, and they don't allow
That's the
the
top and the
sea
bottom.
liners. And
What about the sides?
so I don't
Like
understand. If you could
what?
repeat your
Meaning, if
question. That
we're a flat surface,
Mhm.
what happens when what's over here? What's over here? What's over here? And what's over here?
So that's the architectural heuristics. So in the center is the North Pole, and you must have heard about the four rivers coming from Jannah. Yes, that four come from Jannah. The Farat is part of the rivers that lead come from Jannah. Yes.
Yeah.
So four rivers. If you look at the ancient architectural map, the archoboreal maps, they have four rivers in the center, which is part of North Pole, and those four rivers are dividing into different four directions of the Earth, and that's where the Earth gets its actual rivers. And on top of the now, I'm diverging a little bit, but I'd like to bring your attention to the equation when the deception began to mask off of me. The equation I came across was the one where it was for every mile there's one square inch, a squared inch worth of dip. So for example, the equation is for every 2 miles there'd be 4 inches or 4 inches of fall or drop. Like for example, the equation says that miles versus drop equation. It talks about the fact that for every mile you get a square drop. So d squared, for every mile there's a d squared drop, and for every mile you go down you have that square of it in terms of inches. You have a drop, and they've done experiments keeping that the equation in mind, that if it were this far it wouldn't even be visible by standards of refraction or reflection. It shouldn't even be visible. And they did. If you give me a second, I can bring that equation to and reference the equation properly. So
So I'm saying that are all the pilots, I mean, has no pilots ever gone to the edges of the earth?
Admiral Byrd did. He did, and he then wrote his diaries, and and he said that there are civilizations past the ice, because the ice wall is very thick. It's 100 feet tall, and and there's a large area
So then I
of
saw your things you sent me about Ya'juj and Ma'juj. The biggest thing that I saw just readily, just like going through it, is that the Quran does not mention Ya'juj and Ma'juj are underground at all. You know, I mean,
No,
the
no,
yeah,
we're not talking about Yajuj Majuj on the ground. Yajuj Majuj were blanketed by Zulkarnain, and many people say, oh, he's Cyrus or he's probably Alexander. Alexander, he couldn't be. There's no Alexander was a looter and plunderer. There's no connection with of Yajuj Majuj with Alexander. But Yajuj Majuj, they are the European hordes, like the Huns, the Bulgars, the Vikings, the Goths, the Visigoths,
okay,
and these are
that's
the
your
people that.
understanding of. Okay,
Yeah,
so
that's a different topic. So what I'm trying to talk about is that, for every mile you go further, you have to dip a little bit according to the curvature, and there's a particular equation for it. So if you go down 8 miles, it's a 64-inch drop. Sorry, miles, a 32-inch drop or something. That drop will not bring you up back by a binocular, even via refraction or reflection. There's no optical device that can bring you back and there's no refraction taking place. Now they've done experiments on boats that went like miles and miles, thousands of, hundreds of miles, and they were still able to bring them back into actual real focus, real image, not virtual image, real image. And they were able to bring it back. And the only thing that was clouding the view was fog and hydrological mist and atmospheric mist and lack of human eyesight acuity. So that's and there's a particular equation that actually talks about it. And there's a I wish I could find that equation, but I'm having a bit of a so that equation would solve all the problems here. And this particular equation is what convinced me, because science has to be verifiable, reproducible, recordable, and repeatable. If one thing doesn't make sense, then the whole idea needs to be questioned, must be questioned. If everything is correct, then the equation has to follow through. This is how the research began. And if you look through history, there's been so much corruption in
let
form
me
of.
ask you this question: if the Earth is flat,
Mhm.
then wouldn't the pressure of the air be different on the Earth than it is right now?
How do you know that it's supposed to? It's different, and what difference are you expecting it to be at?
What I'm expecting is that the pressure would be in the middle, as you would normally find in flat
We
surfaces.
we know that the rivers are coming from the north, from the middle, and as you move further away, it gets corrupted and polluted. The barometric variation, which is the wind pressure variation as a function of time, per unit area. It's subject to factors such as humidity, hydrological cycle, and these two things are major determinants. And on top of that, wind is a creature in its own right. It's an actual creature, a mystical creature. There are many kinds of winds. Some
So,
winds are destructive winds
so
that
if there's a sun here, why is not Maghrib the same? Like, why is there not the same time around the world?
because the sun is rotating, mapping the angle as a function of time on top of the
The Earth,
disk.
okay, the sun is rotating around a
Yeah,
flat,
yeah,
right?
yeah,
And what is the moon doing? It's also rotating.
yeah. It's following, chasing it, in sort of chasing it.
Okay. And so the sun is going this way, the moon is coming around behind
Anti-clockwise.
it. Yeah, okay, anti-clockwise, which would be
Yeah.
this way. Okay. So it's going this way, and then so they're both going this way.
Yeah, but there's quite a lag, and the rate at which they're mapping the angle in physics, there's a thing called angular kinematics, which is like it's for things that are moving in circles. So here, the velocity would be radial velocity, which would be a measure of the angles mapped per second. So the sun is mapping certain amount of angle per unit time, and then the moon is chasing it, also mapping angles. And now, if I mean, if you want to say, oh, the sun is moving in a tilted fashion, that's an advanced work. But what we're trying we have enough evidence to suggest that the way seasons change is in harmony with the flat Earth model, because in winter it moves right to the extreme, which is Tropic of Capricorn, I think, and it's in winter of normal winter months, it's summer in South Africa and Australia, and in normal summer months it's winter there. And if you check how sun translates from Capricorn to Cancer to equator, it's extremely consistent. Now your question was, why isn't Maghreb all over the world the same, and all the it's because the vastness, and also the sun is not omnipresent. It's not an omnipresent sort of an entity, deity sort of a thing that can be omnipresent. It's limited, a glowing ball. And one of the other deceptions that are available in the maritime and navigational system is that NASA has admitted on its website, where it photoshops the images of the Earth. I mean, it's got telescopes that so powerful that they're looking right at the depth of the space, but they've never turned that telescope or those telescopes back to, show what the Earth actually looked like. They're still photoshopping the images. That's one thing. Secondly, what the NASA has confirmed that all their calculations are in plane of the sphere.
For example, this whole coronavirus thing has happened. And even though there's a global conspiracy, but there's a significant amount of people that are questioning it, right? And
Yes.
it hasn't even been 2 years. So why have, like, comparatively, you would say, okay, then they'll do like a certain global conspiracy. They should be, if they were so good at the flat Earth, hiding the flat Earth, why have people, like in the case of 9/11, for example, or in the case of coronavirus, why has no number of people have ever come out amongst the pilots, people that are working on GPS systems, people that are working in different fields? None of them have come out, or at least I don't know how many people have come out and started saying, wait, this does not make sense. The Earth is not in the shape that we're being told.
I mean, we know about it, and the few pilots that did object to it had their careers. One was Native American, and the other one, all the pilots keep quiet about it. And most pilots, as I said earlier, it's a matter of spatial imagination, and the software does all the calculating for you. Now, I wrote something here down, which is that when you were talking about the curvature, but there's an equation that tells you that for this amount of distance, they will be.
The other thing I want to mention, since we were talking about pilots,
Yeah.
I've been on the air a lot,
Yeah.
a lot
Yeah.
in my life. I've traveled a lot, and I had been up high enough, like when the plane was going from the U.S. to Malaysia, for example.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I have even within the U.S. Or like I think it was going from Turkey to New York, one of the flights that I
Mm-hmm.
remember. But when you're up there, you do get a feel that the Earth is spherical. Like
Yeah, because of the dome. When you look at the sky, it's curving, isn't it? the sky is curving, and what you can see from your little window in the airplane is that it's curving, and it's a curvaceous, curvy sky, and so that gives you, that makes you, reaffirm the fact that yes, we are in a sphere and it's rotating and everything. But I'd like to ask you that according to the laws of physics, when you're firing a bullet, they never ask you to keep ask the snipers to keep curvature of the Earth in their calculations approximation. They ignore the curvature when they're doing bullet calculations, and when they're doing it on paper and in real life, and they don't
Well,
ever.
okay, I know a little bit about guns because I
Yeah.
own. Okay.
Yeah.
Now, most rifles are going to go 150 feet.
Yeah.
Okay. Some
Yeah.
of the better rifles will go 250, 300, 400 feet. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't think that is, of course, you can always put it into your calculation, but it's so insignificant that I don't see why you would do that with a gun at all.
Well, if you put in the
And
feet
then
in that
the
particular
same thing I would say for tanks, because you're just talking about miles,
yeah.
right? So I don't know if that argument holds.
That's fine, but according to that particular equation, which says that for this much amount of distance, there has to be this much dip in the object. So if that equation would stand true and is being used by
So
NASA,
like
it
if
should
it's
have.
like half an inch for a mile, no gun shoots a mile. There might be like one or two rare ones that
There are I think a sniper records that was round about 1.5 mile, I think, where the Canadian sniper who shot in Afghanistan, he did a sniper world record that was I think 1 mile, 1 mile something.
Okay, but again, that you're talking about a half an inch, right?
I mean, I wish I had the equation. I used to have it on me, but that particular equation proves that for every mile there's an inch's worth of a drop, and
So if I was shooting someone's head and I had a gun that could shoot 1 mile ahead,
yeah, you ought
well,
to
I might get a neck instead of
keep
a
a check
head.
for the curvature, but you never do. And it was the confirmed kill was roundabout, I
But
think.
they don't because it's not needed. I don't think there's a need for my rifles that I need to keep in mind.
Now the
Like even
record
in fact,
held.
I have a rifle that has the laser thing, the red
Okay,
thing.
yeah.
So it's like you don't need it. I mean, it's clear where it's going to shoot. It's
So
going to shoot
the longest record held by
100,
the
100
sniper.
feet.
Well, I mean, I'll show you something here, which says that the longest world record is for 3.54 kilometers. So
Okay,
what
so
does that
you're
make in
talking about a
miles?
difference of 2 inches, right?
3.454 kilometers. I don't know how
Okay,
much that
3
is
inches.
in imperial meters. Imperial 3 point. I'll just have to. So 3.5 miles in kilometers. I would give you around about. Sorry, hang on. That would round about. Providing the answer as 2.2 miles. And he missed the first time, but he got the second time. And the reason is that why aren't the gunmen not fixing their rifles for the curvature? Is because they're not needing to. Now, if you look
Yeah,
at
because of the lack
such
of
a large
distance.
distance, why aren't
Because
they
of the
having
lack of
feeling?
distance. Whereas, for example, the missiles that work through GPS, the long
Yeah,
distance missiles, they use the GPS systems.
yeah, yeah, they do. Yes, they have a gravimeter in there, and they have the gyroscope in there as well that is monitoring and balancing the directional
So if
vectors of it.
this is a conspiracy, then the person making and doing the program, the software for the GPS, has to be lying. The person who's putting up the GPS has to be lying. The person who's then driving the plane has to be lying, or doing, all the cars now have GPSs, right?
Yeah.
So how are the GPSs working if
Well,
they're all
has
programmed
anyone
for
told you that
a
these
circular Earth
GPS is
when the reality
well?
is?
Yeah, I get your question. That's a wonderful question. Perfect. And all the rookies asked this question. What about the seasons and what about the, But if I were to tell you that all the GPS systems, they are confirmed tower systems. There's and people who have done the research on satellites, they see that all of these satellites are just vague numbers, and you can't see any of these satellites at a particular location. They're beeping in and out. And people who did software study on these satellites, they found out that these were complex serial numbers, and they weren't actually real, items up in the sky. By by now, there should be thousands circulating, and the amount of space
Well, that's what
debris
they
should be.
claim. They claim that there are thousands.
There are thousands,
In
and
fact,
the space
the traffic
debris.
of satellites is getting so much that they, from what I understand, they're beginning to bump into each other. And so now they have a special like task force to make sure that the satellites don't bump into each other.
Yeah, they don't bump it, and they know about the
And
space
I think
junk
there
as well.
have been some news about satellites falling to Earth. I think recently something happened with China, something happened with India, so on and so forth. So
India claimed
I've
that
heard,
it got pooped out on the surface of the moon, and it never came back, and it crashed there, and it failed. And there's always a convenient excuse for that. But in terms of aeroplanes, when they're taking the flight, um, it's an automated software that is fed into the autopilot, and then they just book in the destination, and then they go from there. If you do, now I've studied the airline patterns quite a lot, and according to the globe model, if you say that the Earth is rotating anti-clockwise around its axis, all the airplane needs to do, if it wants to go from Taiwan to, let's say, South Africa, or it wants to go to some Central African country, because that's equal in terms of longitude. It's on the same latitude. If you wanted to, the aeroplane would just need to go up and wait for that part of the Earth to come um, beneath it, and then just land there. And according to the globe model, the airplanes would need to do so much nose dipping every time they are taken off or taken a landing, that they would simply not be able to function. That's the globe model, which says that Earth is rotating around its axis and then around the sun. That's what the physics says about it.
actually, you know what? That's so interesting because I remember taking flights, and if it was in the direction, let's say the country is getting closer to us, right? So on the way going, the flight would be shorter, let's say 6 hours. And then on the way going, because the Earth is moving in the same direction as the plane, the same flight that was now 6 hours has become now 9 hours.
Okay, hang on. So you're saying that if the plane is moving against the motion of the Earth, then it would be longer, yes?
Yes.
But according to physics, the plane would never arrive at that destination, because it would have to go. It would have to exceed the speed of rotation, axial rotation, which is quite a lot. Which is, I think, 1,000 miles per second or something like that. It's a speed of Earth rotation, around its axis. Um, it's quite a lot. It's a giant number. It's it
No,
rotates.
I think you're making a miscalculation there because let's say there is two objects here
It's
on the
1,000 miles per hour, so the
let's say
airplane would
let's say
need to
I'm
go.
moving this book
Yeah.
at 5 miles
Hmm.
and I put an ant here, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And if this is moving, this book is moving, has no impact on, let's say, an ant and a remote control car moving here.
No, it would always have an inertial impact, microcosm and macrocosm, the
So let's say if
micro
this is
inertial
moving at,
influence.
let's say if this is moving at 10 miles an hour, this book,
Yeah, if it is moving, then the
and
ant
the
and
ant is
the other
moving at 1
ants
miles
are
an
moving at the
hour,
same
and I
velocity.
have a remote control car that's moving at, let's say, 1 mile an hour, same as the ant. The movement of the book has no impact on the movement of the remote control car on the surface and the ant on the surface.
It does have it by physics, my inertia. There's something called inertia that makes you um, uh, accountable for every movement of the system inside and outside, and you are subject to the same motion that your system is. If your system is moving at 1,000 miles per hour in vacuum around the sun, then you are moving at 1,000 miles per hour. It should have the same physiological impact, that you can't get
That's
any
true
cushioning
whether
out
you're
of it.
at rest
Now,
or motion, because I think even the second law of Newton actually addresses this issue. Or one of the laws of Newton's actually addresses this issue about being in a certain plane and the movement, because the whole theory is the three laws that Newton has to do with motion.
yeah, the first,
Part of it,
so the second law
and
you're trying to describe is the net effect of, the effect of net force and upon the mass, and it makes it accelerate. So if you are linked,
so if I'm in a
joined,
plane, the plane is going 300
yes.
miles,
Now
right?
let me help
If
you.
I'm
I'm
inside
not
the
trying.
plane and there's two
Yeah,
people inside the plane,
yeah.
I'm moving at 3 miles, another person's moving at 5
No,
miles
no, 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 no,
inside
no,
the
no, no.
plane.
The
That's
vector,
what we
the vector resolution, which is differential maths. If your plane is moving in a certain direction at let's say 700 kilometers per hour, and you will experience 700 kilometers per hour while
but
sitting
we
in the
don't,
plane.
and we don't move
No, no, you
experience.
do. The reason you don't experience it is that you're not flung from your seat, and it's because of the internal environment. And now I'm sort
Well,
of, you
that's
might
the
say I'm
same thing. There's
contradicting
a
myself.
different, the Earth, its movement, and the plane on top of the Earth. These are different environments, different planes. And so my point is that your point being
Yeah,
that
yeah.
if the Earth is moving in the opposite direction of the plane, then
If
you
it
would never
were
be able to catch up.
for the flights in which it's moving at a minus 1,000 kilometers per hour, and the plane's velocity would have to be 1,001 in order to at least make a difference, in order to make a movement of 1 kilometer per hour as a differential. When
No,
you're in a plane and
I
you
think
move to the toilet,
you're mixing up two things. One is the speed of the rotation of the Earth.
yeah,
One is the speed
axial.
of
So
the
there are
Earth
two
itself.
rotations. One
So,
is rotation of the Earth, and
and
one
one
is
is the
rotation.
actual movement of the Earth,
Yeah,
right?
so
So,
rotation
or
is
in your
around
opinion,
its
does the Earth
center,
stay still?
and
I'm not,
movement is around the sun. So these are two rotations. One is axial, which is 23 hours and 56 minutes, and the speed for it is 1,000 miles an hour, and the other one's around the sun. Now, let's elaborate upon the example of the plane. If you are seated in a plane that's moving at 700 kilometers, let's forget about the rotation of the Earth now. Now, if you move from your seat and go to the loo, which is at the back of the plane, and you're moving at around about, let's just say, 10 kilometers per hour, it's a small distance, you'd be experiencing, because you're moving away from the momentum of the plane, you're in negative momentum, m minus, which is delta, delta equals m times minus v velocity. You'd be experiencing 710 kilometers going against you, and which is why you feel a bit.
I don't think that's the case. We do not experience.
Calculation would prove that
You
if you
feel
are,
movement, but you don't feel 700 miles of movement.
your net velocity, the net actual velocity would be 710 kilometers per hour net. And so that's just the basic equation of it. If the Earth, for example, is a globe and it's revolving around its own center at 1,000 miles an hour, now, if it's revolving in an anti-clockwise fashion, and the sun and the aeroplane is going in an clockwise fashion, it needs to have, okay, forget about the atmosphere. Just visualize the place where you flew from. Now, if you flew from that place and you are airborne now, and you are trying to reach the other side or other part of that particular, some other place, um, why don't you just go up in the air and hold on till it comes under you by its own virtue of rotational motion, and then you can land by nose dipping? Why do you have to go across, still across, as though it was silent and stationary? If it were actually moving, why
That's
don't
what I
you
was
just?
trying to explain to you. So let's say if this is moving at 10 miles an hour and there's an ant on this thing moving will move the ant at 10 miles an hour, but the movement of the ant from location A to B will be at its own speed.
Yes, it makes sense when you are thinking in Unitarian, non-mathematical terms. But when
Well,
it comes to
I
actual
can actually put
engineering
an ant
design,
here,
engineering
put an ant
design
here,
would have to
and I can put
compensate the
another
speed
ant
of the
here and
system.
see that which one would go faster from point A to point B. And I could be moving this at a faster pace than those particular ants.
Well, yeah, but there's a thing called resultant velocity. If your system is moving you around, yanking you around in a particular direction at a particular speed, and you want to go in an opposite speed or in a speed that's slightly different, or in the same speed, you'll experience a combination of forces, momenta and forces. And what you'll be able to do is a resultant. There's a thing called resultant velocity that is dependent. So, for example, if you want to go north, if you want to east, but the east wind, there's a wind in east push going from east to west. Uh, it'll push you to west, and then you'll have to fight against the wind from east and you'll end up somewhere in south north. You'll end up somewhere northwest, southwest. If you don't make a move, the east wind will push you somewhere in east or southeast, some part of south, east, south. But if you make an effort, you'll end up not in north, but you'll end up someplace a little bit northwest after a lot of effort, and you'll have to expend fuel and energy. Now, your question is that if you have a flat plate, let's say if it's a flat plate, I mean, I'm surprised you're having to use the flat plate argument to prove the globe Earth. That's quite, amusing. But if you, let's assume we're on a plate and the plate is revolving, rotating as a function of time, and you have an ant. I'm drawing a diagram for my own visual imagination, and the plate is rotating. Now, first you have to clarify whether it's rotating around its center or whether it's rotating around some other foreign body. So if you can tell me, in this particular example, are you assuming that the plate is revolving around a particular foreign body, or are you considering its internal axial motion as well? Because that's what's happening with the Earth. You have two velocities to resolve. One is around the apogee perigee of the sun, the solar body, and one is its own velocity, which is around its axis. So we have two velocities to configure and calculate and resolve in the vector motion, which is why in the movie series Star Trek and Star Wars, they never show you when a plane is entering or spaceship is entering a planet. They never show you the planet in active rotational motion and active motion around its own particular relevant sun. They show you all planets in Star Trek and Star Wars as stationary balls. And it's not possible for a spaceship to lock coordinates to a specific part on a planet that's moving around its axis and moving around a particular place, a particular sun of their own solar system. It would be very, very difficult for an aerial, vehicle to actually resolve 6, 7, kinds of velocities and land on this. Now, so can you please clarify, is the plate revolving around a foreign body or is the plate rotating around its own center?
So from what I understand, if you are in any plane, okay, any area, and even if that thing is moving, for example, I'm moving in the car, or if I'm moving in the plane, or if I'm moving on the earth, that force that's moving me has nothing to do with things moving within that object. They
Sorry.
have they follow their own rules, in other words, because
why would an object detach itself from the system for the small tiny
well, I mean,
microcosm?
it's in human experience, right? I mean, it's like
Well, the
we talk
experience
about the
tells me
plane.
that
I
everything's
could
flat,
be in a
nothing is
plane
rotating.
moving 700 miles
Yeah.
and walk from point A to point B in that plane. So that is, at least
No,
in my observation,
I'm
pretty
saying
much true.
if the Earth was actually rotating and the plane was traveling in an opposite direction, it would never be able to catch up because the maximal speed of 717 or 747 is 700 odd kilometers per hour, whereas the
No,
Earth is revolving
I
1,000
think
miles
that
an hour.
while what you are saying true, it is incorrect. Meaning,
Okay,
of
let's
course, the
talk
thing is
about it.
moving 700 miles a second or whatever it is, but if you the way it is designed by Allah, that then you can even have the same question about normal human life. When I go to person A from point A to point B from my house to the masjid, let's say, why do I not feel the movement of the earth?
Okay, so you said that because it feels that everything, if
The
it doesn't
bigger the
feel.
object, the less you will feel. And uh, your own speed within that surface has its own mechanics.
So first, well, in the beginning of our discussion, we had quite a lot of misconception about the actual spherical dimensions of the sun, and we were imagining the sun to be as NASA predicts and explains it. But then we had to, boil it down and actuate it to the real size, and use the Pythagorean estimation to see whether rays converge
But
on
how
top.
can you make an estimate if you
It's
don't?
not me who's done it;
It's
it's
not
other
like,
scientists who've done
I
it, and they
understand that,
found out
but
to be
it's not like we
3,000.
can go up to the sun. Like, I'm talking about me and you.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
Not
yeah.
like I can take a rope to the sun and so I don't
No,
know,
no.
right? I
If you do
mean,
Pythagorean Euclidean analysis, which is part of Euclidean geometry, Pythagorean analysis, you'll see that if the rays are at an angle, come into you at
no
an
matter
angle.
what theory you have or what math you have, the one basic thing I do know is that you always have certain assumptions, right? So when you are making an equation, you
Euclidean
always will
geometry
have
is
certain assumptions.
very realistic. It's 3D geometry, and there might be assumptions in terms of
Yeah, but
complement
3D
angle.
geometry will only work if you actually go to the object you're measuring. If you can't get to the object you're measuring, then there's an assumption.
That's where the deception can come in as well. And they can
Okay,
make it look like
fine.
whatever they want, wherever they want, and however big they want.
I
And
would like to move the discussion to, because I'm running out of time and
yeah,
there's
that's fine. But coming back to
but no,
I
I
think
wanted to talk about how did they maintain this conspiracy of the, like, if you
okay,
look
yeah,
at COVID,
that I can answer. I mean,
doctors are
I
coming
can
out
tell you
every
that
day.
because of.
Doctors are coming out every day saying, wait, there's a problem with this. There's a problem with this. There's a problem with this, right? How come with the flat Earth scenario, no one has there's no experts coming out yearly, bi-yearly that I know of that have been coming out and saying, hey, we don't know what the ends of this Earth are. And,
Well,
uh, and of course there's the lack of pictures, right? Why are there not people that would know about this? Because it's just human nature that would know about this and try to take a journey to the ends of the earth, so to say. But I'm pretty much willing to almost, I feel that if I was to start from Chicago and take a flight uh, going in any direction, meaning towards, let's say, Pakistan or towards Russia and Alaska, or if I was to take flights in any direction, I would probably end up back in Chicago.
yes, because you're circumnavigating on
I mean,
in a
wouldn't people
circular
notice
fashion.
that, let's say if, okay, let's say somebody's come to this part of the world, right at the edge, and there's a conspiracy, they don't want people to know about this. But wouldn't people notice, because of the movement of the sun from the east to the west, that, hey, we're going in the opposite direction now compared to the direction we should be going to get to where we're supposed to get?
Well, okay,
Because they
let me
can't go
simplify
further,
it.
right? They have to now go this
But
way.
I think for the problem you're having at the moment is spatial imagination, and that's where the deception creeps in. It's very, very, difficult to rectify spatial imagination. But what you need to realize is the plane is circumnavigating in a circular fashion on top of a plane. So most people, they can't resolve the sphericity and versus the circularity. It's not about, we're trying to bring the actual visualization from spherical understanding understanding than to circumnavigation of the planes. And flight fraud is a huge topic. I mean, it would take me 2-3 hours to talk about why the direct flights that appear to be direct on the globe are always blinking and they disappear, and they say, oh, sorry, flight disappeared. You can never book a direct flight to that on routes that are direct on globe. But if you take the equidistant azimuthal equidistant map, all of the flights are following patterns of equidistant azimuthal map and not the globe map. And for example, sometimes you hear, oh, it's refueling in Dubai, but you think, oh, Dubai is so far off on the globe. Why are they going there? Why don't they just do it from here? Why are they going from Latin America to Australia to Alaska? On globe, they are so far apart that it wouldn't even make any sense. But if you take the azimuthal equidistant map, which is hidden in plain sight in the UN map, you'd see that all the flight patterns are working according to that particular map. That's one thing. You can do your research in your own time, and there's plenty of channels that have exposed it, and people who travel far more frequently, they've said that all the direct flights according to globe configuration, they disappear after a while. And moreover, I'd like to talk about this something you mentioned, that why aren't there pictures available, why isn't data available? 3 years ago, Dr. Baloch, there was immense amount of wealth of information available. YouTube, the new chief of YouTube, the Polish woman, she's cancelled a lot of channels. They've demonetized a lot of channels. They've hidden it. They've hidden it to page number 10, 11, 20 of YouTube. The only way you can get to those channels now is you keep clicking over and over and over and over. The first million videos you'll see is why flat earth is not correct, is why it's ridiculously stupefying. And the other thing, look, I'm not satisfied with the plate argument. We'll need I need to clarify the vector dynamics of what happens when you're moving against whilst you're living in a moving object. You experience the force and the inertia. You're going against the inertia, and it's very simple for you to say, oh, I don't experience 700 kilometers, and when I go to the loo, and it's not 710 kilometers per hour. You have your own speed, 10 kilometers per hour, and you're moving forward in 700 kilometers per hour, and it's certainly visible on a train when you get up in a train, and because the media is denser, it's earth, and you can definitely see that you can shake and you wobble a little bit when you going towards the loo in the
Yeah,
back
but
of
you
the loo.
don't feel the speed of the train, right? Meaning
Um,
you don't feel going 50 or 60 miles an hour. Yeah, you feel that there is an inertia on
yes.
you. Okay.
So
So I
that
don't deny that
inertia
you
is
feel
the
an
proof that
inertia,
you're
but
going
the
against
bigger the
something that is
object will be, the less you'll feel the inertia.
okay. Now, that equation which states that for 1 kilometer there's an 8 centimeters worth of dip. For 2 kilometers, it's 32 meters worth of 32 centimeters worth of dip. Now, I'll give you the equation for 1 kilometer, and I'll leave you with this equation because it's extremely important. And for two, it'll be 32. And that equation will tell you how and why things are as the PTB. And you can then extrapolate it for 250 feet, and then you should see that for your target, which is 250 feet away from your gun, it should be that much down, but it isn't. And people who did refraction experiments, laser experiments, they found out that there was almost zero curvature, and the laser only deviated by 2% here and there. Now, coming back to the plate, we have to rectify. We can't just make it vague and anomalous, because it would then leave room for so much error that this calculation wouldn't be valid. You have to specify whether you're on a plate and the plate is revolving around its axis, because the calculation for that would be different versus the calculation for when it's going around a larger object and it's orbiting a larger object. Because one of the deception of maths is that in maths they can flip, they can just deviate a little bit, and it would take you to a completely different avenue of calculational analysis, and you'd be maths, as useful as it is, it's exceptionally deceptive, and only those who've done higher graduate maths or quantitative statistics. I mean, there are lies and then there's statistics. You'll realize how deceptive mathematics can be, and how the data is produced and represented and provided and portrayed. It has that much of a distance. Now, you might say, oh, doctors are coming out every day and corona and this and that, because this is something that is in public reach and observation. It is diagnostic and clinical in nature. You have blood analysis, you can do homocysteine analysis, you can do physiological analysis, respiratory analysis, you can check the signs and symptoms. But unfortunately, you aren't large enough, as Adam used to be 100 feet tall. You aren't large enough to look to the other side and what's happening. And humans aren't simply large enough to appreciate the universal truths as they were previously. And technology is so concentrated in the hands of the foot soldiers of the Antichrist that it's completely, a lot of private scientists have had their careers mogged, and pilots were dismissed from their posts. And these people, they actually came out. But then the modern pilots, not every pilot is an experienced astrophysicist. They are pilots. They know how to control the plane. This is what I'm talking about, hyper
Yeah, but I'm
compartmentalization.
talking about, okay, but given that's true, but a pilot knows in the direction that they're moving in.
Yes, and that's basic plane management, vehicular handling. These people aren't experienced astrophysicists in touch with the stellarium, and they haven't done all the things. But in my astrophysics class, we are just given pure raw data. We don't know which telescope it's coming from. They just give us the data. They say it's from Cuba or Chile, and that is it. Sometimes it's a radiometric telescope, like a radio wave telescope. Sometimes they say it's an X-ray telescope, and that's it. We just have to process the data, produce the curve, send it back. That is it. We don't know what's happening. Similarly, because of intense hypercompartmentalization and this topic being so complex and already being made complex, most people are just there to save their jobs and make their careers great and put a nice title. And they are very thankful to be part of a complex, a
What
school
about
of.
the idea that, the Alchem razor argument on this issue?
Yeah, I mean,
The
I've
argument
heard
that is
about it.
Alchem razor basically is the argument that sounds the simplest is probably true, and the
And
argument that's more complicated is probably not true. This is what one of
yeah,
the
that
I would
applies to.
say that the Earth being round, just like the moon, just like the
No,
sun.
sorry. When you say round, are you saying spherical or are you saying circular? Because round can be very confusing. So if you can use the word spherical, like a ball,
Yeah,
yeah, spherical, that would
yeah.
be
So
far more
the Earth
clear.
is spherical, like the moon and the sun. Uh, and just as the moon doesn't have a dome on top or a dome on the bottom, nor do the stars, nor does the sun.
No, we never said that
Why
moon.
why should we assume that there is a dome on the Earth?
We never said or claimed that sun and the moon or stars, they have a dome on top. They're not. They are disks, luminary disks, just like Mars and Venus and all these seven
Why
planets.
does
They
the
are,
Earth have a dome on top?
because Earth is the center of creation, and on top of it are layers of heaven, like the onion model. Rasulullah said that the universe is like an onion, and so it has layers like an onion. And that hadith, I'm sure you must have gone through it. And this NASA model is the reason why Muslims have failed to reconcile hadith with the astronomical model. Astrology is correct, but modern astronomy is corrupt and false and ridiculous, and which is why lots of Muslims have died secret deaths of atheism. And I know many people confess their atheism on YouTube because of the hadiths pertaining to sun seeking permission to come out from underneath the throne of Allah to rise again, which is true. And also the hadith where astronomical architectural heuristics of the universe is being explained by Rasulullah. You simply cannot reconcile it with NASA, because NASA, or Rasa or Jasa, what they've
I
done.
don't feel that there's any discrepancies personally. I
Okay.
don't. And the thing is that I'm fine with both. But
No.
for me, one of the great things about, you can say the NASA model or whatever you want to call it, But one of the great things about it is that it makes the universe infinitely big.
So big that, you know,
And
it makes you, and then,
it
so
makes it infinitely big, and the model that you're giving me makes the world very small.
no, it doesn't make it any smaller than it ought to be. But how you distribute the architecture is what matters. So now they've reduced the Earth to a pale blue dot, but given grandiosity to the large emptiness, which is dark matter and this and that, and all of these fictitious elemental particles. And the actual research in the CERN Hadron Collider, and many of it are available in America and China. The actual research in these particle accelerators is not to find new particles, it's to extract dark matter and to break the portal that separates the other world versus this world, so they could bring as many out and prepare the foot soldiers. It's this research, particle physics research. If you look at it closely, it's extraction of antimatter. And a lot of places that had a high paranormal activity had high concentrations of antimatter and a very weak magnetic field. And it's known that jinns are very averse to B field, magnetic fields, and magnets are very beneficial for human health. Whereas a negative B field is very encouraging for the presence of these secret hidden entities. Now, that's just about particle colliders. But when you talk about the distribute, you have to have a background in physics. You have to carry out the calculational analysis to see where the discrepancies are. And
I
I'm still
understand saying you have to have a background in physics, but majority of the people with the background in the physics would disagree with you.
That's a witty comment.
No, I'm just simply saying
Most people are
you're the
clinging
one that
on to
brought the
this
proposition.
idea.
You're the one who brought the proposition that you have to have a physics
It is.
background.
I'm only but a very small, proponent of it. But there are major people on YouTube that still are in function and are qualified physicists that have done the research. And then there are videographers. These videographers have split apart the transmission from NASA and ESA and found out that most of these transmissions are fake, and it's just a collaborated collegiate caliber. And the photoshopping of NASA of the Earth's images is extremely unconvincing. Now, vast majority of the people that subscribe to the globe model are clinging on to it to save their belief, and saving themselves from accepting the actual truth of how close we are to the throne of the Almighty, rather than, and they just want to float in the idea, they're worshipping scientism, and they've been brainwashed so aggressively that they don't, it's very, very hard for anyone. I can understand it, very hard for you to just remove or scrap out everything you learned and then start anew. But what I'm trying to tell you, that you don't need to scrap out everything you learned and start anew. It's basically the shifting of that. It's a shifting of spatial imagination. So instead of sphere, you have to imagine in terms of circular. And if you look at the actual data on NASA's website, they've admitted someplace in their website that they're in some documents that these calculations are done in the plane of the sphere. In the plane of the sphere.
I can buy most of what you say, but what I can't buy is, or what I'm having a hard time, maybe you can help me in that.
Yes, please.
That if we have a flat surface,
yes,
and we have the type of vehicles, airplanes, boats, all this by the hundreds of thousands, that why are we not reaching to the end of this earth and falling down?
oh, you mean falling off? So you're still imagining in, like, you're in the space. So that's the problem here. You have to stop imagining in terms of NASA model. That's not your fault. I'm not criticizing you. It's not criticism, but you have to come out of that brainwashing. The edge is surrounded by a large ice wall, and this ice wall is,
there's an ice wall around the edge. Where are the where is this ice? I mean, who has seen this ice wall?
Admiral Byrd saw it, and this ice wall covers the entirety of the circumferential perimeter of the what we call it.
Let's say if somebody is flying,
and there's a North Atlantic
South America,
treaty
somebody is flying to China.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
So let's say you're flying from South America to China, right?
We should have had the map in front of us, the globe Earth map and the flat Earth map for the audience to benefit from it. But yeah, I'll try my spatial imagination.
Maybe I can help us with that.
Okay, whilst you do, I just wanted to say that you have to visualize that there's a wall, ice wall around the entirety of the circumferential perimeter, and it's accessible from Argentina, from Australia, and the points and South Africa, and places where it's extremely reachable. The concentration of American and the NATO Army, Naval Armada is there to stop people from venturing into it, because if they climb the ice wall, they can go and carry on, and they'll end up in a different land, in different lands that are green. And yes, again, there's a space background which is quite off-putting, but yeah. So if you were to go
Okay, so
from
you have a border here, an ice border, right?
yeah, yes,
Right? Okay. Now there's a sun that people are locating themselves against. So let's say I am over here in the south of USA. Okay.
that's very far off from the ice wall. So if you picked Argentina,
No. Wait. Okay. So I'm flying from here and I'm gonna go to China. Okay. I'm gonna go to China from here.
yeah,
So now if I take the plane ride based upon, because the plane ride will be based upon the imagination of the globe, correct?
yeah, yes,
Okay. So the routes that are the planes are traveling on is based upon the routes of the globe, okay?
yes.
Not on the flat,
Yeah,
right?
according to normal person's
Okay.
visualization,
But
spatial
we would
imagination.
actually get there using the flat map. That's how you
Yes,
would
that's what I'm
actually get
trying to
there.
tell you.
But
That's what
you're
I'm.
going to put the GPS coordinates based upon the global.
All the pilot has to do, who's a trained vehicular driver, is that just put in the coordinates and just sit there, flirt with the air hostess, and that's it. And just make sure, talk to the tower once every hour, and then make sure that the plane doesn't crash, the fuel is at on point, there's no leakage, there's no, and then they have an engineer on board, and then they make sure that the mechatronics are in function, are integral, and properly working, and then they just land and they pretend to be all sophisticated and
It's
smart.
very hard
And
for
that's
me to accept the fact that with the type of fast vehicles we have, uh, that that there's not a large number of people reaching the borders. Is this? I just don't understand.
because there's a very heavy naval presence of the top 10 countries, and they've signed a treaty agreement. I hope you,
Okay, so if there is a presence of top 10 countries naval agreement, then
yeah,
there should be some people
they
who are
stop
working
you. And if you
under
don't,
those
listen, then
people,
they'll
who are working
probably,
under those people, who are working under those people. Somebody saying something, you know, some people bringing out. In fact, I
well,
would
if a
make
Navy
it
general
convert.
who's been
Yeah, I'd
commissioned with
say
an,
like this would be harder to hide than COVID. COVID
I
would be a
can tell
lot
you this.
easier to hide
I'm not
than
going to
something
go
like
into
this.
the hyper-compartmentalization details as to how I think they're fooling the local naval general. But I can tell you this, that people who are in control, the top magicians, secret society leaders, witchcraft practitioners of the topmost caliber, they know what the actual architectural heuristics is, and they exploit it all the time. Now, if you, for example, were a naval air commodore, let's say
So when I
Air
look at
Commodore
these
Baloch.
two, for example, we have in our screen here,
Yeah.
I think the first one looks closer to the sun and the moon compared to the second,
Sorry, what do you mean in terms of closer to the sun and moon?
meaning the spherical nature of it. The
Um,
spherical, I mean, the moon does not look like the flat surface.
so have you like,
Or
is
it
there,
did.
well, I mean, if you do telescopic analysis, you see that it has craters, it has some bumps and granules, but it's not curving at the edges. It's sponge, like it's bulging out in front of you. I value your criticism, but it's not curving. at the edges. That's the morphological analysis that would be the key, and that's been discussed previously. And like the
Why
moon,
is there ice around the edges? Like, what's the reason for that?
first of all, it serves as a hydrological balancing. You know, it provides you clean water, and it's like a purifying septic prison planet, septic a detachment, and it's a
Does
prison
the
planet.
sun melt this ice?
The sun is revolving not on top of this ice, but within the parametric constriction, and it's obviously there's a full hydrological cycle, and the hydrological cycle converts ice into water, water into water vapor, and then it goes back down and comes back on the mountains, and it's doing it. What I'm The question was that, for
So
example, if
this
you were,
part that is under the dome that's under the flat surface, the
yes,
dome that's
good,
under the
yeah,
flat surface,
yeah, yeah.
what is that?
That's where so seabed is not the end. Seabed is just like a flat, basically it's beneath seabed. There are portals to the underworld. There are reptilians and other creatures which Ajaib al-Makhluqat by Imam Qazwini, and the other Imam, Kitab al-Ruh. They've spoken about the fact that majority of the jinns live in the second or the third layer from the top. And if they came out, you wouldn't have a space to breathe upon. And and reptilians have been known to live underground. Many people who had experiences with jinn. My own friend.
So how come the Earth is so different compared to everything else around it?
Exactly, because you're using the NASA model over and over again. I would implore
Because
you
I'm
to,
looking
to,
at
to look at the biblical and
the Sunnah of
Torah
Allah
model.
that, huh?
If I would implore you to look at the biblical and the Torah models, that's when you begin to understand that it's a sphere with a dome on top, dome at the bottom, and there's 7 circles. Hadith and Quran further, expand upon this model and say that it's not just one; it's 7 circles, 7 domes. And Rasulullah said that the first sky, the first heaven, is so small in comparison to the second
Yeah, but
heaven.
then if you're saying, okay, there's 7 layers going down and then 7
Peeling
layers
onion model.
going on top, uh, then this does away with the 7 Earths too.
It,
You
it
know, in a sense that
signifies and confirms the presence of the 7 Earths, because the model that talks about the flat Earth, well, there are layers to this Earth at the bottom, and then the other maps I've had a look at, they state that the ice wall could have further bumps in it that could be other Earths. They could have. Admiral Byrd said, when I flew across the ice area, I went into other lands that were green and they were lush and they were normal temperature past the ice wall. So he traveled quite a bit, and then he came all the way back. Why?
well, what
So
he
now,
said doesn't fit this
I'm
model.
sorry. Now, if you were an admiral in the Navy and you were commanding a fleet of, let's say, destroyers and corvettes and 1 aircraft carrier, and you had to make sure that no one travels. So you were commanding an arc. So you were commanding all the region from the Cape of Good Hope, which is South Africa, and all the way till Australia, and you had your naval armada spread across this arc of the region. Your job is just to stop and let them just tell them that we'll shoot you if you don't get back, and you have no time, because you're managing such a large fleet. You have no time. You're exhausted, and you're away from your family. All you're thinking about is your family, your leisure, your benefits, your pay. You have no time to examine the circularity or the sphericity of the plane you live in. The jobs we do make us so tired. We don't have time for hyper investigation, for time in looking into it. That's one thing. But sadly, if you can please, whilst on the call, if you can open the biblical model, and if you can open the model which is mentioned in Torah, I think that would be far more accurate. If you could open that one, please.
All right. So what do I type here?
Flat Earth in Bible map, Bible diagram, flat Earth Bible map. Click on images. The one I'm looking for is yeah, this one. You've got the one, the gray flat Earth, and the Sheol. Jews have a Sheol. Jews do talk about the Sheol, the dark underworld, the Hades, and it's going down and down. And the other thing I wanted to talk about, the magnetism that's originating from the North Pole,
I
molten
don't understand.
metal.
Which one do you think is the one? Which one?
In my research analysis, it's the one, two, three, the second one from left, and then that's the high definition azimuthal
This
equidistance, and
one?
then yeah, this one's quite accurate. It gives you a correct understanding of the flight patterns and how and why the flight patterns that are appearing to be direct on the globe, why do they never materialize? And why all the flight patterns are taking place in comparison. Now, if you go from America to Pakistan, you can see what route it takes, and you can check it on the globe, and you can say, okay, this route should be the best, but what actual route, what actual stops is it stopping at? If you juxtapose it on this map, azimuthal equidistant map, then you'd see, oh crap, wait, look, this is what's happening. And a person who had a heart attack, I think he was going uh, um, from Australia to Argentina. It was a direct flight, refueling at Alaska. So and he was stopped. They had to take a sharp, closer turn to stop and give him medical aid. But that was very, very far off on the globe. And if you scroll down, I can show you further maps that are very, very correct. In the Bible has the now this map shows you North Pole from the top, and you can see the four rivers originating from there. The four rivers. If you apply the globe model,
This one?
yeah. If you apply the globe model, you can never reconcile how the four rivers are, making their way from space into Earth, and then becoming Nile and Euphrates and Mississippi and this and that. So the rivers are originating
Well, for
right.
me, that's very simple. For me, the water of the heavens is connected to the water of the earth. مرج البحرين يلتقيان
Yes,
بينهما
but not in a, a globe model. A globe model, the Earth is so far
connecting, but
away,
it's not
suspended
touching.
nowhere, that it's very, very difficult for you to, imagine water pipes or water flow getting connected from where. I mean, because science doesn't recognize. It says that you're trapped in a bubble of universe. It doesn't say that you. And notice the word universe. And only recently did they introduce the word multiverse to cover themselves. But it says that you're suspended in the middle of a large bubble that's 42 billion light years, and somehow
So for me, the four rivers are the four rivers within the Holy Land, the premises of the Holy Land, like the Nile, the Euphrates, and these areas that are holy, they have some connection with the divine.
sorry,
Is the
what rivers flow through Jordan and Holy Land, and if I may ask?
Well, the borders, basically. So you have the Euphrates, right? You have the Nile, and then there are two other rivers, but those are the two main ones that the prophet mentioned.
Yeah, that's perfectly fine. That's wonderful. But North Pole is the center of this architectural heuristics, and not any other place. And it's North Pole from where this magnetism is coming from, and coming to the point of
If you're
magnetism.
so concerned about, being so exact, let's say even within the Earth, uh, things didn't happen in the North Pole; they happened in the Middle East.
Um, sorry, what do you mean when you say they didn't happen in the Middle East and they
Meaning,
happened in
if everything is about how it's positioning, what you're basically saying is, look, they've made the Earth
Sorry, you mean politically or
politically, scientifically, the Earth is in nowhere, right? It's like in the middle of nowhere. It
let's
has
yeah,
no
according to
importance,
NASA model, let's if we
right?
assume
And
that,
it's
yes.
in the middle of nowhere. It has absolutely no importance. But okay, well, this model shows the Earth is more important, kind of thing. And
Extremely important, the only important thing, and connected
then you
directly to
still
the
have the
Quran.
problem of the Makkah should have been the center of the Earth.
Well, China is larger. There's quite a lot happening there. There's been many, many civilizations there. And you have the lands of the Yadud Majud, where the sun sets. And then you have Russia, which is a 300 million population. You have Latin America that has more, around about billions of population. I think 1 billion. Africa has 1 billion's worth of population. Then you have America that recently got settled. And prior to that, there were civilizations like Antediluvians, Tartarians, Phoenicians. There was a civilization of Atlanta that got sunk as well. So a lot has been happening on all corners of the earth. But not all races got access to prophets or what have you. And then there is Yajud, Majud, and whatnot. But the center of the earth, from where magnetism is originating, where the green lights appear, it is the North Pole. And one thing they say or tell you is that, look, and the magnetism is generated by the molten nickel, cobalt, iron core. But if you actually melt a metal, or if you melt iron, if you melt cobalt, it does not strengthen or hyper accelerate the magnetic field flux, B field. It actually ruins its magnetism. A solid iron magnet, hematite or a magnetite lodestone, its maximal magnetization or magnetic permittivity is when it's solid. But when you melt the stone, it gets molten into its composites, and it's no longer magnetic. So you can't generate magnetism out of a metal that, when molten, can't keep its magnetism in place, to generating a whole planetary 55 microtesla worth of B fields all around it that is strong enough to deflect the solar particles, because the solar particles are coming at a very, very powerful accelerated rate. A B field of 55 microtesla is not enough to deflect them to convert aurora borealis. Simple, calculational linear arithmetic physics that normal people aren't, because it's immense amount of brainwashing, immense amount of free time required to calculate and analyze it. And I still have access to the channels that are doing real quantitative research, and they themselves are avid travelers, but they have been stopped by the naval armada, and they were threatened with missiles. They couldn't take their vehicles past a certain point, and they're aggressively accessible from the south of Argentina, south of
So
South
if you look
Africa.
at this picture over here, it shows the
Yeah,
sun, and the sun is throwing its light in
yeah,
half of the.
almost, yeah.
But this is scientifically, I would say, incorrect. That's not how light works.
Sorry, so how do you think science light? Because light's made up of photons, waves, and photons, Huygens
Yeah, so why do the
theory.
waves just stop at a certain point? That
They
never
get
happened.
dissipated. So in physics, for example, let me show you. Like when you have a torch, and you turn it on, it's brightest at its beginning, but as
Based
it
on this,
wanes
there
out,
would be
it
there would be no, but
attenuates.
there would be uh I mean, if this is the map and then that's the size of the sun, let's say, I would say there would be a lot more light than.
But you also have to see at what distance on top it is. And the distance that's been calculated by Pythagorean analysis is that it's round about 3,000 miles on top. So given its size, there's a huge amount of attenuation. And by the time it gets to the bottom and hits with
Do
its
you believe the clouds are on top of the sun, like they show here, the
well, I've
stars,
been on top of Pendle Mountain,
and then the
and
water, the firmament, and the floodgates? Okay. I mean, there is water up there because we know Jannah is up there, so that's not an issue for me.
but not in the
Uh,
NASA model. You see, in the NASA model, when the Muslims have reconciled it, saying that, oh, what NASA sees as empty space is just this, it's just the difference between the first heaven, the first asman, and this and our existence. So Muslims have subconsciously reconciled it because they didn't know how to counteract this deception, which makes them feel worthless. And millions of Muslims have either become atheistic, or they died secret deaths of atheism because they failed to reconcile the hadith of architectural heuristics with NASA model. The NASA says that you're a blue pinch, a pathetic pinch, and you don't matter. The millions of planets like you, all are chemical monkeys, and you have no connection with either top or the
so as
bottom.
I'm looking through this, it seems like there's more than There's quite a few different flat models.
Exactly. But I didn't want to take you there because there's quite a lot of work being done because it's all private. It's all underground. And they have to use, there was a video which clearly showed a rocket going past the moon in on YouTube, but that's disappeared. It's been demonetized and deleted. That video showed a
I
private
think we've
scientist.
been talking over 2 hours. I really do need to
Oh,
go
sorry.
and
Okay.
my prayers.
Well,
But
I would invite your panel to talk to me, and also I'd like to have the opportunity to speak with Azra Rashid because he's touched on this, and I don't have any contact details of him. So I'll be very, very grateful if you could probably provide me his contact details, or in future,
I don't have that person's. I don't know who he is.
He's from Birmingham. He's a very renowned scholar, and you've had a few videos. You've done I think one or two videos with him on certain topics, and he's a very popular scholar in Birmingham.
I don't know any by the name of Azra.
Asra Rashid from Birmingham.
Oh, Isra Rashid.
Yeah, yeah, Azra Rashid, yes.
So he may believe in the flat Earth theory. I'm not sure.
What I've noticed, Dr. Baloch, is that none of your panel members have a strong background in physics, and it's just guesswork. I'm willing to do actual calculational analysis with the plate calculation that we couldn't do, and show more proof and discuss it in depth with people who do want to aggressively tackle the topic and who want, I mean, you've been very, very enthusiastic, and I'm very thankful, after a long time, a long wait, I've been able to, reach you, and I'm thankful for the opportunity, but it's only a start. Muslims are losing their faith in a very happy and architectural heuristics is directly linked to their belief, because belief is part of how you visualize the world you live in. And if your frequency is not tuned in to the right, you'll miss out the actual frequency, and then you won't be able to connect. And that's why the Judaic tradition is so powerful and successful, is because their command on architectural heuristics is pinpoint accurate, and they know where to.
It can't be pinpoint accurate because they disagree amongst themselves. So
yeah, they have the Reformists, the Satanists, and the Sabbatai Zevi movement. That were inversionists, Satanists, and but
I still don't understand, or having a very difficult time understanding that if there is this wall of snow around this disk,
proper ice,
or ice, why does this ice not exist around, let's say, the moon and other stars? And
because they're disks.
Why is the Earth so different from everything else out there? And of course, we can bring the I haven't even started bringing in the Quran into all of this, but because I feel the Quran gives a different picture. But maybe we are being fooled by. I don't dismiss the fact.
What do you think about the ayah where Allah says that if you want to escape, it says challenges the jinns and says.
I don't dismiss the fact that NASA is lying on.
That's fine. I'm not here to convince you. I'm here to just give you a perspective on what's actually going on and the level and caliber and permeation of deception. That's all I'm saying. I'm not. It's not about my ego. I won't. Feel very good if you get convinced. It's not about ego. It's about finding and searching the truth. I'd just like to ask you, what do you think about the particular ayah that says if where Allah challenges the jinns and says if you want to get out of the bounds, then I'd like to see you try. What would you think about that?
I would think that that's why they made NASA. That's why they made all these organizations, to find a way for the jinns to leave.
So why were they firing megaton nuclear warheads in the sky where there's no enemy and they're trying to break the surface? If it was all gas on top, then what are they trying to break? Where are they firing their rockets? And why are they trying to kill the ones in heaven? What was the Star Wars project all about? These are some of the dissonances, and the equation which says that for every 1 kilometer there's an 8 centimeter drop, for 2 there's a 32. Why is it that these equations aren't standing up to them? Because the microcosm always has to respond to and be in congruence with the macrocosm. How come the basis, the foundation is shaky?
Well, if I was to say that to you, then you got a problem with the shape of the Earth that you're giving me. because the microcosm, which is the earth, is not in congruency with, according to you, with the macrocosm.
Sorry, can you repeat that? I mean, how? I didn't understand this.
You make the argument the microcosm has to be congruent to the macro.
Yeah,
And I
as
would
above,
say
so
the
below,
earth,
all the time.
as you show the earth, it's not congruent to the macro.
Sorry, how am I not?
Well, like if we were to now bring in a little bit of Quran into this, okay?
Please do, yes.
وَلَقَدْ زَيَّنَّا السَّمَاءَ الدُّنْيَا بِمَصَابِيحَ. The sky of the earth is adorned with stars, right? So this whole thing that we see, this universe as we know it, is masabiha of dunya, of the
So
masabiha.
what's the actual 6th century translation of this
But
ayah?
now the word masabiha is important because masabiha means something that combusts, something that has energy, right? And then you have also وَإِنَّ لَهَا لَمُوسِعُونَ. We are causing the universe to expand. This is there, right there in the Quran. Then you also
there's
have
big yawn, there's big yawn, there's big crunch, and then there's big, the state of inactivity where it stays what it is. And the science actually supports the state of inactivity, and some go with big crunch, and very few, a minority, go with.
All that's fine. All that's fine. But what I'm trying to say is when Allah says, and Imam Ibn Hajar, not Imam Ibn Hajar, the great scholar who wrote the book Al-Muhala. His name will come to my mind. He's a great
No,
shaykh.
don't worry about it. I
So anyway, the
understand.
point is that he uses the verse of the Quran, تولج الليل في النهار وتولج النهار في الليل. Right? He uses the word يولج الليل ويكور الليل على النهار, and he does like cover literally means like going around. Or كل فلك يسبحون, and even the way that
and all the planets are swimming in their orbits. It's swimming.
Well, that fits more in
the flat Earth model, the firmament
in the global model, because then the Earth is also swimming, right? Otherwise,
well,
the Earth
it's not swimming in a fluid. It's not a fluid. It's vacuum. Just to correct you there, and you can pull up a physics book right here. I'm sorry, I disagree. You're wrong there. It's not swimming anywhere. It's complete pin drop vacuum. Such vacuum that only EM waves can travel, and even they travel with quite a lot of they travel with a lot of difficulty. But the convection can't take place, conduction can't take place, and it's a mystery to me as to how, when they state it. I've studied vacuum all throughout from GCSE up until now, and properties in vacuum give crazy properties to even normal objects. And
so let me ask you this: does light not travel in a vacuum?
Just travel. So it's not swimming anywhere. There's no fluid.
No. Answer the question: does a light travel in a vacuum?
It does travel, yes.
Okay.
EM waves travel.
So by vacuum, we don't mean like complete zero, right?
No, sorry. What I'm trying to say is EM waves can travel. Sound waves that are made of, so EM waves are made of
radio waves, all sorts of waves travel through the space.
No. See, here, let me clarify this. There are two types of waves, longitudinal and transverse. Transverse, not all transverse waves would travel, only EM waves that are independent of media. Media means you have to have some some medium to transfer it. Sound waves are longitudinal. Earthquake waves, the secondary waves are transverse, but primary earthquake waves are longitudinal. And there's a proof that the shock takes place with the power of an angel, because the primary waves of the earthquake are longitudinal and secondary are transverse. So transverse water waves are transverse. Lots of transverse waves out there, but only EM waves can travel through space. The rest of the waves cannot travel, whether they're longitudinal or transverse, because they need a medium. So Earth and planets are not swimming anywhere. There's nothing in the ether theory was debunked by Einstein, who wanted to cover up the Michelson-Morley stationary Earth and ethereal experiment. That's been done with in Annus Mirabilis 1905 papers, where he introduced relativity, and they made a religion out of it. And that's where Hinduism congruently fits in there, because Hindus have been worshipping these jinns, masquerading as aliens in the Vimana in the Mahabharata, and they worship them. And that's where the alliance of Hindus and Dajjal, and Hindus in America, and Hindus and Einstein comes to be so strong. So let me rectify. We're not swimming anywhere. There's no fluid. There's no solid. You can't swim through solid, but you can swim through a gas or a liquid. And there's no liquid. There's nothing. And I'd like to ask you, if so, how are people in Australia walking? So do you think that people in Australia are walking upside down, Dr. Bloch?
First of all, sabbaha yusabbihu doesn't necessarily mean swimming in water. It does mean swimming.
Yes.
Okay, it does mean swimming, but not necessarily in water. Meaning, it could mean swimming in its orbit. And
so
it could mean,
why didn't the word floating or flying was used? If the Earth is an a space station flying with the Earth, around our apogee, perigee, in turn, can it? Why didn't Quran use and it didn't say the Earth was swimming. It said the planets are swimming. And now when we do our
no,
research,
but we understand that falak includes the Earth.
that's the
Planet in the
okay,
celestial
that's the
orbit.
reconciliation, the post NASA reconciliation, because when NASA came out with all of these crazy theories, the religions were shamed, and they had to reconcile with it to save their followers, and because people were beginning to
No, no,
leave
no, no,
and
no. Let me
question them.
make this clear.
You have to look.
Every
A lot of
religion was in
Quran has
conflict
been
with it, except
translated from Persian. We have to go back to the 6th century, actuated 6th century translation, where Falak is specifically Zohra, Atarad, and Mushtari, and Zuhl, and Marikh, and all of those ones. And if you look at them, Venus and all of them, Mars, you see that these are translucent, sort of vibrating, circular sort of platforms that are vibrating in and out, and you don't see any blue surface, you don't see any craters, you don't see any. A private astronomer with a local telescope has yet to come up with it, but they haven't. And Falak, so
how
there's
does the night go
there's
into the day and the day into the night in your
okay,
model?
that's a separate thing. But Ard is used to describe the earth which we walk upon, and Falak are the other entities suspended in the sky. And it's specifically saying, so I just wanted to rectify that. Please, in future, just remember that earth is not, there's no fluid, it's completely in vacuum, according to Einstein, that we worship today. And
In the context of the verse, let me tell you, the verse talks about the earth, the moon, and the sun. And then it says, after mentioning the earth, the moon, and the sun, kullu falaki yasbahun. So all taken in context of the actual paragraph is referring to all three of these. Number one. Number two, all could mean generally all, which includes the earth.
that's by Arabic
Samawat,
grammarian standards.
huh?
That's by 6th century grammatical standards, or is it like modern Persian
No,
derivative?
this is based upon Arabic language, classical Arabic language.
So what did Ibn Abbas say? Ibn Abbas, what did he say about it?
I
This
don't know.
verse, this particular verse.
I don't know.
Um, okay, so I mean, I as a rookie, as a physics student, bona fide physics student, when I look, I've been, reading. I see that Ard is for Earth, and then falak, aflak, all of that. Iqbal goes berserk about aflak, and then you see that it addresses foreign bodies, not the one we walk upon, but so I mean, okay, so
Either way,
just
either way, the point is, how do you reconcile the verse? تولج الليل في النهار وتولج النهار في الليل, or يكور الليل
I
على
take it as a shifting of the day and night periods. It's just if you look at how the
how
sun
does it
moves.
work in your model? Because in my understanding, the night and the day can only, like, one side is day, one side is night, can only work in a global context, in the global shape of the earth. If it's flat, you have the sun here, the moon here. There's no يكور الليل على النهار ويكور النهار على الليل, or تولج الليل في النهار وتولج النهار في الليل. You don't find that. I mean, I just don't see it.
That's I would say that's a limitation of spatio-temporal imagination. When I was part of elite exam, I had lots of trouble, and I had to develop my spatio-temporal imagination skills. And vast majority of the people have not been trained in spatio-temporal imagination, visualization. Sorry. So
Could
what
you
you
make
have to
a
know.
flat surface with
Yeah.
some sort of light on one side, some sort of moon on the other side? Let's say we close the lights, and we create a sun, and we create something that, let's say, reflects the light of the sun on the other side. And do you think it is possible to create a 3D model that shows what you are saying?
There's already available images available on Google. If you want to, I can explain if you or I can try
Because I
to
don't
elaborate.
think, and I've been, because I have children and we do science fairs,
Yeah.
in the science, and the most recent one we had to do with planets and so on and so forth. So now, if there's a sun, okay, and let's say the sun is small, okay, let's say the sun is very small, but some of that light is going to have to permeate through the whole.
Permeate or penetrate, and that's what I talked about, the concept of attenuation,
But
that it
if the moon, like, because one side is dark, how is one side dark? It's not dark because of the
yeah,
moon.
yeah. But have you come across islands or places that stay illuminated for 6 months and then dark for 6 months, and they are middle ground between light and dark, the middle ground, and they stay like northern islands of Japan and extreme most islands near the North Pole, and um, um, uh, Russian tundras, and then Norwegian and Finnish areas that are neighboring Russia, enveloped by Russian politics, political border. They experience a transient sort of like luminosity conditions. They're
So, okay,
dark
so
for
now
many.
let's talk about this. The situation where there is no light for 6 months and there is light for 6 months. How do you do that on a flat surface?
I mean, if you have to realize that if you are able to create a model, and not only that, you have to, Dr. Baloch, also have to translate the
So,
sun.
so I'd like to see a model of a
Yeah,
flat surface
yeah, yeah.
in which we can see a model that works with the sun and the
Draw
moon,
the three lines. One is
where,
equator.
okay, but even if you do 3 lines, where is the 6 months light and 6 months dark?
So, I mean, we know that in winter it's like 6 months of darkness for Norway, isn't it?
Sure, but how
Yeah,
will it work on the model, like an actual
yeah. So I want you
whether
to.
NASA is lying or not,
No, 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 no. Don't worry
whether
about
it's
it.
lying or not,
I'm
wait,
not
wait, just
vulnerable.
listen. Whether it's lying or not, the idea that there is night and day, the idea that there is, because of the tilt of the Earth, whether it's true or not, okay? But then there's 6 months light, 6 months dark because of the tilt of the Earth. It makes sense. Whether it's right or wrong, okay. But I'm saying, now show that to me in a flat model where I can see some parts of the Earth are getting 6 months light, 6 months not, and how night and day is working. How,
It's only 2-3 parts of the Earth that are in that transient condition. But I would start off by taking an A4 leaf, a plain A4 leaf, and then draw an equator, a circle of equator, like a circle, a 2D circle, and then a bigger circle, Capricorn, and then a bigger one, Cancer. So three. I don't know what order. I think it slipped from my mind as to whether Tropic of Capricorn or Cancer comes last, but I'll have to double check. So you draw these three circles, and you have to move the sun from equator to Capricorn month by month, and then you have to gradually move it, and then, but you have to realize that it's Dr. Bloch, please visualize this with me, that the sun is revolving, rotate, going anti-clockwise around on top of a disk in an anti-clockwise manner, but it's also translocating back and forth. So it's a bit like people who've done simple harmonic motion. So it's doing circular motion as well, but it's going around, translocating back and forth from. You see, on it's a very new visual concept. But if you took a piece of paper and you draw you pinpoint the circle, sorry, the center, and then you drew three circles around it, each larger by a factor of many, and then you get the sun is translocating back and forth whilst continuing to go around. And that's when you actually do graphical rotational translocational analysis. You'll see that at that particular point in time, its rays are not going to be reaching the extremities that are right in the center, because when it's at tropic of the last tropic, which is I think the Cancer or Capricorn, its light would be very difficult to reach in the centers of the model, which is when it makes sense why Norway and the northern islands of Japan and Russian tundra is without light for 6 months. And when it comes to the equator, they're
I'm
getting
not able to visualize this, just so you understand.
that's where I think we need to do the work, because vast majority of people, fail at visualizing. If you could visualize it, that's where, the freedom would be. But I can, hang on, if I can, Tropic of Capricorn. I think that's the last one. Tropic of Capricorn's the final. Yeah, sorry. So Capricorn is the last, and Capricorn is the furthest from, and it covers South Africa, and Latin America and Australia. That's the one that covers that.
So when you have
And
a flat map and
yeah,
different people in the map, if everything is static or more static, then wouldn't everybody see the same stars throughout the globe? But we don't see that, right?
No. I spoke about that in the beginning of the video, that there's a stellarium. Stellarium is that the stars that are fixed, they have their own movement, and they end up at the same place where they started from. If we were revolving around sun, and sun was revolving around the center of the galaxy, and galaxy was revolving around the center of the universe, you'd never see the same sky in your life from 1 second to the other. You would never have the same constellation consistency. But the fact that the North Pole star, the North Star, its circumpolar navigation stays constant, and all the stars rotate around the North Star. If you were around, according to NASA model, they should, which I mean, North Star, having a North Star doesn't even make any sense. According to the NASA model, where everything's globular, isolated, rotating around the sun, and then sun around the galaxy around the center of the universe, 42 billion light
Well, it
years.
makes sense if you were living 200 years ago and you were in a ship. It makes sense if you're living in a desert and you need to travel, because the North Star is only the North Star only because
Maritime and aerial navigation systems still
recognized.
pegged to the stars now. When they lose the navigation, they still use Sohail and Tariq. So that's what they use till now. The Big Dipper and the canola and everything.
Yeah,
all the
the North Star is part of the Big Dipper or the Small Dipper, one of the dippers.
So
And
they still use the maritime, especially the maritime navigational chart is pegged. I would say, use the word pegged to the stellarium, and they use it as a gold standard. And they're getting the navigation GPS is a tower-based system, just like internet, as they have you
how do they
believe
have
that
a
it's full of.
tower-based system in the middle of the ocean?
It's called triangulation. They've got towers in the middle of minuscule minutiae of islands. They've got the tower systems there as well. And just to let you know, I'm not sure if you know about this. The internet we're using right now is not satellite based, Dr. Bloch. It's wires from the sea. These are wires benched and blanketing its network through the sea. Cables, network cables, fiber optic cables from different parts of the earth, connecting different parts of the earth, and that's where you get your broadband from.
Yeah.
We don't get broadband from aerial
Yeah,
cyberspace.
not yet.
We get it from and there are extensive tunnel networks
But
that.
a ship that is using GPS will use what normally we will call a satellite.
Yeah, and there's plenty of
And the
actual.
GPS used in our cars and our planes and different places is using the satellite.
Yes, and there are people who did the analysis on YouTube that look, I can make my own satellite and I can release it on this database, and it wouldn't even cancel it out, and it would just add it to the system. All these satellites have large batch codes, and they are just there blinking in and out, and that is it. And they're not even they don't even tell you the. So he said, okay, this satellite should be on top of me at the moment. But it wasn't, there was nothing there when he did telescopic analysis. And the thing they call ISS moving over you every 24 hours. We don't know what that is. We have no idea what that is. They say that the space station is moving. Have you heard of the ISS coming over the sky? And you must have seen something moving in the sky once in your life. No, in astronomy, and I've seen it myself as well. And they say that it's the ISS moving, circumnavigating circumnavigating on top of the Earth. And it's and they've got and we don't know what that bright spot is, that bright blinking thing that's so large and is going over the Earth every 24 hours. We don't know what that is. It could be a guardian, heavenly guardian angel station. It could be something else. But we also need to realize that there are two kinds of satcoms, satellite systems. One's a geosynchronous and the other one's a geostat. So there's a difference. So there are equatorial satellites, according to NASA, the polar satellites. There are that do polar navigation, and there are circumpolar, and then there are equatorial that do diametric and then there are geostat and geosynchronous. And most people can't get their head around like geostat, geostationary, and geosynchronous. Geosynchronous is the one that locks coordinates with a particular place on the earth, like Miami or my hometown Scunthorpe, and then it sticks there, and it coordinates and modulates its speed so that it stays on top of Scunthorpe all the time. Whereas geostat is the one that stays there, and that's it, and then it's just mapping. And so there's plenty more, but I'd like to get back to the book example you said. And we have to resolve the book example, Dr. Baloch. We can't leave it, because you said that if a book
that's on you to do. I mean, that's on a person who is of your opinion has to do, because I personally think this flat surface creates a lot of problems for the Quran than it solves.
I'm going to just say that which model gives you more faith and belief, and which model makes you an atheist? That's all. I'm going to ask you a simple question.
The global model makes me think it's more congruent to the Quran.
Isn't that because you are trying to aggressively reinforce your belief upon the model?
I don't know. Maybe I am that brainwashed.
I mean, I asked you a question about the heavenly rivers. How would the rivers flow all the way from Jannah, that's 7 heavens away, according to NASA model? According to NASA model, that'd be a lot more.
Let's take that as an example. Okay, if I go to the Nile, which is connected to Jannah, if I go to the Euphrates, are you saying that if I travel the Euphrates or if I travel the Nile, I will end up in Jannah?
No. So what was Garden of Eden?
So then, I mean, if not, then it's an allegorical statement.
Yeah. So what do you think Garden of Eden was?
What do you mean?
So Garden of Eden, there are many interpretations of Garden of Eden. Sure. One is Jannah, and one is there was a nice place on earth which Adam and Eve first came down to and lived there.
I think the Jannah we're going to go to is different from the Jannah Adam was in, if that's the question. I'm inclined towards that opinion. We all
believe that the paradise of Firdaus and different stations of it. It's a lot of atheists like Ghamidi and all of these people, they say, oh,
nothing to do with that. That's the opinion of Imam Ibn Kathir also. Because the Quran says when you go into Jannah, the Jannah we're going to go into, Allah specifically mentions when you go into that, you'll never come out.
Exactly, but Ghamidi says that all your hell and heaven is on this earth, and it's all metaphorical and this and that. He's the
well, I don't know about Mr. Ghamidi. I can't speak for him, but I'm speaking for what traditionalists
that is a separate place, but there's also a very, very positive place on this earth, where Adam and Eve lived, and it's recorded as Garden of Eden, and it's the North Pole and the world that is in the North Pole that is full of
So the
brightness.
North Pole where there's ice, that's where he was?
No, ice has got covering, and there are winds. If you read the Bible and you do detailed geographical analysis of it, there are also, like, you must have heard about
You
Jules
have to
and
admit, when you read the Bible, you get more than one description.
okay,
Why
so
they have these
European version,
contradictory
there's
maps.
the European Crusader version, and then there is the actual real
I would say
biblical.
the European Crusader version is closer to uh, Masonic and the underworld
That's
thought.
full of King James, and that's a complete, that's to fit the particular narrative of Western imperialist Christian institution, which has never been religious, because there are certain races on this earth that lack the VMAT2 gene. And the Bill Gates presentation, I'm not sure whether you heard it, but it was about dampening down the VMAT2 gene in races that possess that gene, so that they can become less quote unquote fundamentalist, and that this vaccine is going to fulfill that and make people less and less religious or lazy in terms of religiosity. And there are races on this earth that don't have religiosity in the genetic code, and hence they can't recognize a higher power, and they can't establish a connection with higher power. Or we can say that they've been paralyzed by the Almighty, so that they would never make a connection with Him, or with the Almighty, because they're condemned for hellfire and the hellhounds. That's a different story. I'm not going to go there. But on this earth, there is a place like heaven, which is known as Eden. And it's covered in ice. It's covered with 6 months of ice and wind. And once you go there, it's just heavenly and fantastic and wonderful. And that's into the North Pole, which is heavily guarded by naval armada. And
Why are they guarding it?
It's, I mean, for obvious reasons, and it's also shrouded in a lot of cloaks of winds, and also shrouded with lots and lots of ice, and lots and lots of vast distances. And it's a world of mystical magic where these North Pole lights are originating from. And the further away you get from the center, the more corrupt and the more polluted everything becomes. And if you analyze the waters of,
You're saying the most sacred place on earth is the center of the North Pole?
I'm not going to allocate the terms, sanctity to it, because there are multiple energy centers on this earth. Some of them are very wild, some of them are very, demonic. But you cannot compare the blessings of the Mecca and Medina with the North Pole, because that's where Rasulullah is, and that has to be and is the most
But where the
illuminated.
Prophet is, sallallahu alaihi wasallam,
Yeah,
that's also Jannah. I mean, that's
that's
the
the
Rawdah,
best
it's
place on earth.
the garden of Jannah also. So
Materialistically speaking, when you talk about material physical comforts and material expansion and the good life and whatnot,
I do
that
need go. So we're gonna
yeah, that's right. I think we'll conclude it here. But I do, I'd like to get back to the paper, the example. I'd just like to leave you with a concept. You could think about it further. If you are in a system and a system is accelerating in a particular direction at a velocity, you are performing that velocity. It's not that you are zero, but when you do start moving, your velocity will be a resultant calculation of the system versus your velocity. That's how things are now. If you and the fact that you feel pressure and force is a proof that you are feeling the system inertia. If you are on earth and it's going at 1,000 miles, you have to feel some inertia. You have to move back, you have to feel dizzy to some extent all the time. You have to. If you can't, if you feel stationary, if you're the cochlear fluid in your ears, which is an extreme sensor of any minute movement, and that alerts your brain that we're moving, should be triggered.
I feel that whatever inertia is being put upon an object, let's say a car is moving at 60 miles an hour, I'm not moving at 60 miles an hour. I have to use my own force within that object.
Well,
Just like
if someone was to open the door
if
and fall
there's
out
this
of that
moving at
car,
10
then
miles an hour and there's an ant on it, the only reason they feel inertia is because of the change of the speed, the change of the velocity. So this plane
Yeah,
is not
inertia is a
going
change in
exactly at
movement.
710 miles all the time. When the speed changes, okay, when the velocity changes, you feel a push and pull. Okay.
So
Well,
the
something
resultant,
is
that's what I'm saying,
constantly
that resultant, when
perfectly
there's a
designed.
resultant change,
If
then
something
you
is
begin to,
constantly moving at a constant speed,
yeah,
without any and the bigger the object is. So let's say if I'm in a very big car versus
a truck or an
uh,
18-wheeler, yes.
the less I will feel the movement. I could be in a very big ship and spend days not realizing that I'm actually moving.
No, but do you not feel the
There
bumps
is the
and
there is the force of the boat, and then there is my own force. So within that big boat, I am walking from place A to place B, right?
okay. Have you experienced that when you're driving at faster pace, you begin to get plastered to your seat quite a lot more? And
If
you
you're
feel,
accelerating and not at a constant speed.
yeah, at a constant, and when you're accelerating, you're beginning to, and when you establish a constant fast velocity as well, you experience the throttle and you shake, and whenever you make a resultant movement, you feel the inertia, and
That
it's
has to
got
do
to
with
be
the friction and the
friction as
power.
well, yes. And
Yeah.
there's plenty, we should be feeling quite a lot of it because we don't live in
But
vacuum.
if I'm on a boat that's going X speed, if I'm running 10 miles, that's what I'm running 10 miles, right? So I think that if you're on Earth and the Earth is going X miles and it's constant, there's no brakes, there's no friction, right? And it's constantly moving at an X speed and there's no friction, then if I'm running 10 miles, I'm going to feel my pace of it. I'm not going to feel the Earth's pace of it. Just like if there is
Well, when you
ant,
begin to move,
if
then you
there's an
should
ant
have the
on
result
this, the
effect
ant's
on you.
not going to feel until I start jerking and the ant starts moving
No, no, no,
around.
no, no, no. I think that's where you're mingling the two. First, we were talking about you said that if I move my hand, if I'm in an accelerating car, then if I make my own original independent movement, then I'll feel the inertial, differential. But now you're saying that, I'll only feel my own velocity and not the inertial differential. So please let me clarify. If you make a movement on a moving object, you will feel the resultant inertia of the whole system. So you're moving against the system and you're going to feel the resultant on you.
Well, like if I can be on a large boat that is going X miles, let's say 30 miles an hour, and it's very large, has 6,000 people in it. No one in the boat, in the carnival boats, feels like they're going anywhere.
Because these large boats aren't going at that fast pace, but 1,000 mile an
It doesn't
hour
matter how
for a
fast
large object.
it just matters that you're moving and it's large enough because it
But
has its own
that's
force. As long
that's
as
where momentum comes in, and it's a very dangerous thing. Momentum says that it has to be a product of your mass and velocity. The mass of
if
the
I have an
Earth.
ant, if I have an ant on this flat surface and I'm moving this, okay, this ant is not going to be affected in any shape or form. It may not even feel the force of me moving this as long as
Okay, so that's where I think we need to talk about momentum. Momenta it says that the Earth's mass is 6 to the power 10 times 10 to the power 24 kgs, and it's moving at 1,000 miles per hour. Is it? I think, or second. Is it mile 1,000 miles per hour? And if you multiply it, then you have, in order to justify your example, you have to give me um, an equiproportional example. A sea liner that's carrying 6,000. First, I think the very few sea liners that can carry 6,000. I'm not sure if that's
no,
true.
there are. I
Okay,
actually just recently saw this.
okay, that's fine.
It's actually
But that
8,000,
a sea
2,000
liner
employees with 6,000 personnel.
has to have the same momentum. I hope you understand. So the mass can be different, the velocity can be different, but the momentum has to be the same. Momentum, it's basically inertia and momentum are interlinked and interchangeable according to Newton's second law. So you have to, whenever you go against, it's the momentum we're comparing against. So if you can multiply, if you have a calculator on you, if you can multiply 6 times 10 to the power 24 times momentum, which is 1,000 kilometers, you can get. I think I'll have to convert
See,
kilometers.
let me ask the same question
Yeah.
conversely. When you're on a plane going 700 miles an hour, Why are you not flung from your seat?
That's when you get up and you try to go to the loo. You do experience a thrust,
Right. Okay, but that's because of the friction.
and
That's
well,
because the velocity is not constant.
it's not constant,
You
but it's
feel
also, it's
inertia
not
of
just
the,
friction.
you feel the
Friction's keeping you
pressure,
in
the
place.
inertia of the speed, but you don't feel the, compared to
No, the
700 miles, you
friction,
don't
there's
feel
static
much,
friction, and then there's
right?
dynamic
So
friction.
now you have the Earth, which is created by Allah, and it's moving. You don't feel anything because it's very big.
Okay, so there's two
It's
types
like
of
if there's
friction:
an
static
ant in my
friction
car
and
and I'm going
dynamic friction.
miles an hour, it's not going to feel anything.
So there are two types of friction. One is static, and the other one's dynamic. There's Newton's law of restitution, and then there's dynamic and static friction. Dynamic friction is when you experience when you're moving, and static friction you experience is when you're not moving and it's keeping you in place and this and that. So when you are in initializing or originating your own momentum against the momentum of the object you're in that has its own momentum, then you're going to come across a resultant resultant effect, and on top of that you'll be experiencing static and dynamic friction. So static and dynamic friction actually, they reduce the impact of the momentum, or the resultant momentum, if I may say so. So you've actually validated my argument by introducing the concept of friction and air resistance and lack of vacuum in a plane or in a sea line. And now the other thing I said to you was you have to calculate the momentum of the Earth, which is mass times velocity. Then you have to provide me a sea liner and produce the same momentum out of that sea liner, which is completely impossible. And then you have to walk across it. If with
No,
your
it's a
weight,
very simple question. If I'm on a boat, on a very big boat, okay, why do I not feel the moving of the boat?
okay, so let's do a proper mathematical analysis of it. So the speed of the Earth around itself is 1,000 miles per hour. Now let me convert 1,000 miles.
Again, I totally disagree. Because no matter what, in my experience, a plane that's going 700 miles an hour, yes, I feel the pressure of that because of the inconsistency of the speed. But otherwise, I'm not going 700 miles an hour. I'm going at the pace that I am to the bathroom. I'm going 2
Okay,
miles, 3 miles, 4 miles up to the bathroom. I'm using my inertia, my own
yeah,
speed,
let's just say you're
right?
doing 10
I
kilometers per hour, and
and
then the ship
okay,
is at 700. Now you should be, because you're going in the opposite momentum. Your momentum is minus m, and the momentum of plane is m. So you'd be experiencing a resultant, which is m minus m. That would be, you'd be experiencing the addition, the subtractive addition, because minus and minus, they add, and so you'd be experiencing 710. But the protective
at
characteristic that would
no
make,
point in a plane am I ever going to experience moving 700
no,
miles per hour.
that's
Never.
that's not, you can't, but there are other factors that are blanketing you off of it, like friction, dynamic friction, and you've actually supported
No,
my
because
argument.
then if there is no feel of a movement, that means there's no friction.
No, sorry, can you say that again, because that doesn't make any
If there
sense.
is no feel, if you don't feel anything of anything moving, an object moving, then that means there's no friction.
No, friction stops motion. Friction is anti-motion.
Exactly. So there's no friction stopping the moving of the
Okay,
aflak,
good point, good
the
point.
moving
But
of the.
here, please try to understand Newton's law of restitution. You can open it now. There's the thing called dynamic coefficient, the dynamic friction, and static friction. The static friction is what you experience when you're seated or when you're in zero motion. The dynamic friction you experience when you're moving or about to move. That's the one. And it's an interchange of the different kind of friction, like stopping distance, braking distance, thinking distance, in different weather conditions of your vehicle. So you need to understand that when an object that's part of a system is experiencing momentum of a moving object, no matter what the ratio proportionation of the object and the system, When it's moving against it, according to thermodynamics, you will experience momenta resultant juxtaposition. The momenta will but there are protective characteristics. And by talking about friction, you've actually supported my version of the argument, because these things are deeply interlinked. And some might say, "Oh, we're using Newtonian science to disprove Newtonian science." No, we're not, because vast majority of things are correct. It's only a few things, that are completely false, and because a lie has to stand on truth, a lie cannot stand on. People think, oh, because 90% of that is correct, the rest of the 10% cannot be wrong, except that it can be, and it most probably is, because it needs the 90% to stand upon. The 1980s, all this vaccination from Edward Jenner is the reason you are convinced to get vaccination. Otherwise, if it had been very nasty from the very beginning, no one would ever get vaccinated. It was slow corruption of the agenda that now they've started inserting chips and feeding everyone the chips.
I
But
think that instead of looking at the Bible, if you can also look at things from the Quranic perspective.
Quran is hyper compressed.
The other thing that
It's
I have very
exceptionally compressed.
as I'm one of the things that's confusing me as I'm thinking about this right now, and I do have to go, is that in the center you have ice, and
No,
on
not the center.
on the peripheries you have
Yeah,
the ice,
yeah.
and in the middle you don't. Why?
Well, in the middle, you've got the continents that are quite, experiencing the sunlight, and they're experiencing,
Okay, but in the
light.
middle of the flat Earth, in the middle of the
And Mecca and Medina is at the golden ratio, when you can
sure,
when
okay,
you,
but
yeah,
you have
the phi, which is known as phi in maths, phi.
okay,
So,
but you
yeah.
have ice at the end, you have ice in the middle. Why is there no coldness or there's such heat in the middle of between the two?
Well, you've got like northern
Especially with a
area.
smaller sun, shouldn't the ice poles around the disk create like a much colder temperature around the
Got a
Earth?
very aggressive hydrological cycle that keeps everything in check. The vapor pressure, the standard temperature pressure. You have salt concentrations, and then you have varying barometric pressures. Some areas are high, and some areas are lowlands, and you got different geography, and that's why the sun is not able to freeze everything to death. Sorry, the lack of the small size doesn't facilitate freezing of death. Sorry, freezing of the continents, which is why there's plenty of sunshine in Australia, Africa, Asia, and Latin America, because the sun is not. Bear in mind, mind you, it's not the sun never goes on top of the ice wall. It never does that.
So
It stays
on a
within.
flat Earth, the gravity would be where? Located on the North
So
Pole?
this is where they can't explain stuff. They bring in gravity. Okay, so with gravity, why doesn't gravity? If gravity is so aggressive and keeping everyone pulled down,
No, but
then
shouldn't
why?
all the
Why does
rain move towards where the gravity pull is? I mean, in a flat surface, right? Everything would be moved to the center, correct?
we never talked about gravity? There's no such thing as gravity. It's
Okay.
densitometric analysis. This densitometric differentiation.
So there's no gravity here. It's just a flat surface and there's no
If there
gravity.
was gravity, then everything would be pulled down. You could and you'd have to, for example, why do helium balloons are going up? Why aren't they getting pulled out? Oh, it's because of weight. It's because of they have
Because
very
their
little weight. They're
density
less
is
dense.
less than the air. So they
The
go
less
up.
than yeah, but gravity. You've got gravity holding down mountains, stones. You have it's pulling down objects. It's kept the atmosphere in check. The gravity is responsible for ionosphere, thermosphere, all of it. It's keeping, it's so strong that it doesn't let space dominate the
Not that
gaseous
the helium
atmosphere.
goes
How come
up,
it
it's
can't
that
control
the
a
heavier
balloon?
air pushes the lighter air up.
Yeah, that's
Okay,
convection, advection.
so that's what's happening. The
So
lighter thing is being pushed up by the heavier. As you know, also what? Heat goes up, cold goes down. We experience this in our houses all the time.
so what's that got to do with
I'm just simply because you asked the question about why a helium balloon would go up. compared
Helium is
to
not hot. It's not hot. It's cold air pumped in a balloon. So if it gets cold, it should be bouncing around at the bottom and be stay pulled to the ground, and it shouldn't move. And if gravity was so true, then how what's going on with Australia? Why isn't it, and how come gravity can hold on to mesosphere, thermosphere, ionosphere, which is all of it, which is gaseous, and it can't hold on to a simple helium balloon? And
I
why?
mean, this what you're saying is, because look, if you look at this point, and again, I do have to go, but if you look at what you're saying, and you look at Surah Tariq, for example, one of the surahs of the Quran, uh, if you look at Surah Tariq, right, describing uh, uh, وَالسَّمَاءِ ذَاتِ الرَّجْعِ, right, the sky that makes things return back. Okay, so the sky keeps within it its
And
hot.
it confirms the dome, because you've been hitting megaton, warheads, and you've not been able to penetrate. And
I mean,
Hillary
you're
Clinton,
talking about one event that I have no idea about. So
if
it's
you
like,
look at
I don't know why they did
the
that.
Operation
I can
Fishbowl,
imagine that
right,
they did
you'll be
something
able
like
to
that.
see
وَالْأَرْضِ ذَاتِ الصَّدْعِ, and the earth that
gaseous.
crashes.
A gaseous atmosphere would not return anything. It has to be a solid crystalline dome, and we don't even know what the material of the dome is. We don't even know what material is it made of. And it has to be, it can't return a gaseous dome. A gaseous atmosphere would not return anything. It would be completely open. And so a gravity is strong enough. It's generated by a molten metal that gravity magnet. So is it magnetism? Is
So
it
is there
gravity?
no magnets on Earth? There's no
There are
magnet, because
solid
I
mountains.
seem
There
to
are
use
solid
a
mountains
compass
of
sometimes,
magnetism.
and it seems to work.
Dr.
I
Bloch,
mean,
there
when
are
you have a
solid
compass, have you
mountains.
seen a compass? When
Yes,
you get
but
a compass,
the
it
south
points
the
to the
South Pole
north.
needle
Why
is
does the
arbitrary.
compass point towards the North Pole?
Yeah, but it doesn't point
Because
towards
of
the South
gravity.
Pole. South Pole is arbitrary. There's no need for back the
No.
ancient.
You're missing my point.
I
The
understand.
compass we use to navigate, the real compass, right? The mechanical compass, it 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 goes towards the North Pole, yes or no?
It does, but that it points to a
Okay, so
solid,
now
solid.
wait. Okay, so
You can't generate
if
magnetism
that is true, then the
out of
gravity.
molten metal, out of molten nickel, iron, molten alloy within the
Okay,
lithographic
so then
sensor.
if I get a compass, right, and it points towards the North Pole
Yeah.
here, right? So there's a pull into the middle. Then
Yes.
why is not all the rain, all the winds, everything moving towards the North Pole?
Because water is diamagnetic. If you, I've done experiments. We know that water. There are three kinds of materials: diamagnetic, paramagnetic, and ferromagnetic. Paramagnetic is slightly, diamagnetic are
Okay,
opposites.
but okay,
Water
whatever
is
different types of
magnetic.
magnetic
That's
things
why
there
magnetic
are,
healing works.
why are
Anything,
some things not moving towards the center?
soil and water, they are not magnetic. They are anti-magnetic, if I may
I
say,
mean,
to
what
put
I
in
don't
simple words.
understand is the periphery is
Magnetic
all
permeativity can't.
ice. The
Birds can
periphery is
follow.
all ice despite the sun, and the center is ice despite the sun in the flat model. And you have very hot spaces in between.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense, because the sun is not going on top of the ice wall, and it's not going right at the center. It stops at equator. That's the closest sun comes to revolutions. But coming back to magnets,
I
the
would
really
say
magnetic.
that the cold on the top, the cold on the bottom, and the center being hot, the equator,
It
that
shouldn't
makes
be
a lot
hot.
of
If it,
sense in the global model. I mean, the globe model makes a lot of sense when you look at it.
okay, sorry, can you repeat yourself? We were talking about magnets. So you're saying that it's hot on top, hot at the bottom.
Meaning the globe model, right? The globe
Hmm.
model is hot in the center, cold on the two extremes. And so that makes more logical sense compared
Hmm.
to a periphery here with cold, and in the center cold, and then hot in the middle.
But
mean,
that doesn't, the globe model breaks down when it comes to South Africa, Australia, and Argentina, Latin America experiencing summer in opposite months. That's where it breaks down. If I could draw a diagram, I take a leaf of paper, pinpoint a circle in the middle, draw a circle around it, call it equator, then tropical, draw a bigger circle, call it tropic of Cancer, then a larger end circle, call it Capricorn. Then as the sun is revolving.
Okay, brother, I do need to go, inshallah ta'ala. So it was very nice having you.
Yeah.
And maybe we will continue this another time.
Please do. And I think we've left out the topic of system momentum and also the magnets. Magnets are a very important part of understanding how things are. And
I think that if there is a magnet pointing to the North Pole, which it is, because you can see that in a mechanical compass, then a lot of the things in a flat surface would be pushed to the center.
But Dr. Baloch, with all due respect, you can't generate magnetism out of molten metal because magnetism is only available in solid with compressed and defined domains, electronic domains. But I'd like to have more people from your panel and probably Azrar as well in future to talk about it, because we need more people on the panel who can, and then, yeah, I'm open for a challenge and I'd like to prove every single thing. And I'd like to recommend you some channels as well, and you can do your, homework, in the future.
Well, remember, there are two important things we're looking at here. We're trying to find a model
of it, the systems
on better, right?
Definitely, and to understand
that's part of what we're doing.
And because this wasn't, see, what you need to understand is that in the past, 6th century BC, it wasn't a problem. This is the Dajjalic fitna to make you atheistic and make you paranoid.
It does not in even 1% or even half.
Because you have the VMAT2 gene. You have a strong genetic and you've worked on yourself, and that's why, because of your genetic makeup, it connects you to a higher power. You're not connecting to a higher power because of NASA or this model. You would have connected regardless. There are races on this earth that are religious regardless. They don't care. They just do their rituals. And let me tell you before going, if the NASA model is correct, then witchcraft shouldn't work, because witchcraft is all about force acting at a distance, which proves ether and it disproves, Einsteinian, relativity. That's what I'm going to leave you with. But I hope that in future there'll be more and more your panel members, because I'm open to a live, real-time, actuated debate with more and more questions thrown at me, and I'd like to be given the opportunity to answer all those questions, including the two that are being left unanswered about the magnets and the systematic momentum. I'd like to talk about it, and I'd leave you with the fact that the moon actually grows thin and thick. It's not, as the Quran says. Quran is very clear about it. It's not metaphorical. That it says that it grows back, and it's being grown back. This is the miracle.
No, if it would, Quran uses the manazila, hatta aadaka al-urdun, manzil, stages.
Yeah, like the embryo. Embryo grows in stages. Embryo grows in stages. It's not like embryo's not there.
It's not like it's actually growing. It's going through different stages.
We'll have to talk about the lexicon of the embryology.
It actually becomes small and then becomes bigger and bigger and bigger.
We'll have to compare it with the embryology of the embryo, of the uterus, intrauterine embryology, in order to verify that are the same words being used in 6th century context, or is a different kind of lexicon being used for astrodynamics. If it's the same words for embryology and astrodynamics, then we have to agree. But if it's not, then we can obviously see that, like the planetary, I've
never known anyone to think that the moon actually becomes smaller and becomes bigger and bigger. I've always even
no, not the Earth. I mean, it's just the moon shrinking and decompressing.
Like, because, we have entire books of fiqh, entire books of Islamic law having to do with moon sighting, and so it has never been about.
For all of those religious theologists, expert astronomers.
No,
that's what I'm going to, that's what matters. I'm not trying to make you speechless. That's not my, it becomes egotistical. I'm not here to defeat you in an argument, but we're just trying to discover, we're learning together. And in future, I'd like to take on more panel members of yours, and probably, if you could recommend me to Azra Rashid, I'd like to talk about and with you and him, and so we get to it, because Muslims are terribly confused.
I
They
mean,
are
I'm not in
using.
touch with the brother at the moment, so we'll see.
Don't
Just so
worry
you
about it. It's fine. But even if your panel members are interested to come on, and talk to me and throw questions they've got, and then we can, we can sort it out, because Muslims are terribly confused. Vast majority of the Muslim youth are accepting humanitarianism, New Age religion, energy magic as a new theory of life, and it's happening. Yeah, but,
okay.
scholars
That's
aren't.
Allah khairan, inshallah,
All
brother.
right, then. Thank
So
you very much for your time.
we'll end it here, and so
Yeah, I
take.
apologize for speaking over you, but
No, no,
it's
no, no,
sometimes
no, no,
necessary.
no.
So please
We
forgive
had a
me. And
we had a nice
I've
we had a
always
nice.
appreciated your work. You're a legend, and you've exposed many hypocrites in the field. And I'm very thankful for your work. And I learn a lot from you. And I love your work. I'm not just buttering you up, but I've learned a lot. And the work you did
You
in
go
terms
out
of.
for me, inshallah. Pray for
I
me.
will. I definitely will. But please, in future, I'm open to more challenges. So if you have any opportunity for me, you can bring more people along, and then we
Yeah,
take it from there.
sure,
Thank you
absolutely.
very much for your time, sir. Thank you, Dr. Bloat.
Wa alaikum assalam.